Chapter 463. Once upon a time, Duque had forgotten the fear of death and the uneasiness brought about by the decay of his soul. Looking at the notification on his retina, Duque was still a little confused. Serious warning, host, your Sargeras curse of resentment is active. You will lose your life force at the rate of 1 year per day. This effect has an unknown irreversible status. If you cannot lift the curse, you will die completely after 31 days and 22 hours, unable to be resurrected. Host, your soul power is also losing 10 points per day. It is estimated that it will be gone in 5 days. The soul power he had inherited from Mediv was 385, and his humanity was 230%. This was more than enough. But if he was dead and couldn't be resurrected, there was no point in having any moral integrity left. In the end, he still had to save the Red Dragon Queen as soon as possible. Faced with this situation, Duque was also in a state of panic. The Red Dragon Queen in that history was indeed saved, but that was after the Alliance had dealt with the main Horde forces and entered the mopping up period. At that point in time, most of the Alliance's fallen areas had been recovered. Especially the dwarf fortress Grim Battle where Alexstrasza was imprisoned. Although the fortress was still under the control of the Dragon Maw clan, most of the wetlands had been recovered. In that terrible swamp, not only were there beast men, but there were also all kinds of human liberators. For example, the Silver Hand from Lordaeron, and the dwarves from Iron Furnace Castle. Of course, most of them were the Wormhammer dwarf Griffin Knights from Eagle's Nest Mountain. And now, that place wasn't even the front line. It was definitely the enemy's rear. What did the enemy's rear mean? It meant that there was still the entire Earthy Highlands, where more than 200,000 beastmen were stationed. To go in and save the Red Dragon Queen would be more than 10 times more difficult. Duke had just caused the entire Dragon Riders to fall from the sky above the Alterac Palace. During the battle, he didn't see the chief of the Dragon Maw clan, Zuluhid. Needless to say, he must have run back to Grim Battle to urge the Red Dragon Queen to give birth soon. It was not appropriate to say that he wanted to have a son soon. In order to meet the needs of war, the beastmen needed a large number of wyverns as mounts. Unfortunately, while the Creation Titans bestowed the WYRMS with unparalleled powerful bodies, they also weakened their fertility. In fact, the number of true descendants of giant dragons was so few that it made one's hair stand on end. In history, the red dragons that were used as mounts by the beastmen during the later stages of the war were actually the unfertilized eggs of other female giant dragons. Well, it was similar to the monthly ovulation of human females. However, Alexstrasza was forced to use magic to catalyze these unfertilized eggs into fighting wyverns. Due to their congenital defects, these red dragons could never grow into young dragons that were more than 1,000 years old. For the tribe, this was not important at all. It didn't matter if it was a genetic defect or a magical creation, as long as it could be ridden, it could deal with griffins in the air, and it could cleanse the ground with dragon breath. That was enough. Now, if Duque asked Kudrin to lead the Griffin Knights there, Kudrin would definitely agree with his character. But Duque could not cheat him. The dwarves were the humans' good brothers, and if they were to be wiped out like this, Duque would feel bad. After Duque and Sasha analyzed the situation, not only Sasha, but even Lang and the others' eyes dimmed. To be honest, Duque felt a little helpless. It felt like the more he changed the course of the world, the more he was destined to go against the will of the world, or the amazing ability of the River of Fate to correct things. He had a bad feeling that he was doomed to fail. However, when Duke looked around and saw Ryan, who was still alive and kicking, the Windstalker's third sister, Windstalker Sasha, who was wearing the emblem of the Stormwind Kingdom, and Gavin Rad and Alucia, who should have died tragically, were present, Duke could feel a faint sense of warmth. It was as if they were constantly reminding Duque that everything he did was worth it. Duque sighed, tomorrow. If I don't hear from Aurelia and the others by tomorrow, I'll set off immediately. And please, even if you have to imprison Aurelia, don't let her catch up. I'm afraid she'll do something stupid. No, Duque, you don't understand Big Sis. She'll definitely catch up. Then tell her that I have a 60% chance of coming back alive, Duque said decisively. 60%? That high? It wasn't just Sasha. Almost everyone present was stunned. From how they saw it, no matter who Duque brought with him this time, they would definitely die if they went deep into the enemy's territory. Who knew that Duque would say that he had a 60% chance? I know that this is a huge crisis for both me and the Alliance. But I can still use my magic. Through a history book I read in Karazhan, I know what imprisoned Alexstrasza. The most important thing is that I know how to solve this matter. This is something none of you have. The only problem is that I need to leave the Alliance's command for a long time. Anduin patted his chest and promised, that's easy. Leave the military matters to me. I'll try my best to put pressure on the Horde and attract their attention. Lang continued, I'll give you all the manpower that MI7 can deploy. Duque shook his head. I don't need bandits. Almost as soon as he said that, the light in Vanessa's eyes dimmed. Duque smiled. I promised your father that I'd take good care of you. If your father returns with success only to find that his daughter died because of an even riskier mission, I won't be able to rest easy even if I die. Vanessa didn't say anything. Duque continued, this time, I've thought about it. I only need a few people to follow me. Anduin nervously took out a small notebook and prepared to record. The ones going with me are Gavin Rad and Windsor. Gavin Rad's eyes lit up when he heard that, and his face was filled with determination. Windsor, who had been entrusted with an important task for the first time, looked more eager. It wasn't her first time fighting. But it was the first time that she had to leave her two sisters to carry out such an important mission. The third name that Duque said made everyone confused. I also want to find a young earth mage in the Dalajan called Ronan. I think he'll bring me luck. If Duque hadn't lost his ability to cast spells, Duque himself would be strong enough. Why would he choose an earth mage as his follower? All right. The mysterious Duque was as puzzling as ever. Chapter 464. The Rapid Stream Castle had almost fallen. Only one city was needed for the Horde's flag to be placed on top of the Rapid Stream Castle's palace. But the 2 or 3 seemingly narrow city districts in front of the palace had become a meat grinder for both the Alliance and the Horde. There was no such thing as a front, and the humans were playing hide and seek. They could pop their heads out of the rubble of any ruins, or even shoot an arrow straight at the orcs' head without popping their heads out. It was not until the Horde broke through the outer walls of the Rapid Stream Castle and entered the city district that they were shocked to find that the entire mountain under the ancient capital of Thoradin the Great was almost hollowed out. Under the walls of the Rapid Stream Castle, there were tunnels that looked like spider webs. Many of the tunnel entrances were quite narrow, which the burly orcs could not enter at all. As a result, whenever the orcs attempted to storm the inner city, the road from the outer city to the inner city would be constantly harassed and attacked. The orcs could not transport any heavy siege weapons. Perhaps a bag of kerosene would be thrown out of nowhere and burn the catapults and siege vehicles to ashes. On the 5th day after Orgrim evacuated from Lordaeron, Rend Blackhand, who was in charge of attacking the Rapid Stream Castle, received an order. This order from the Great Chief made Rend Blackhand very unhappy, but he had to carry it out. Since it is an order from Zulud, let Zulud take care of things here. He received a reply. An hour later, the Rapid Stream Castle welcomed its destruction. The wind pressure generated by the flapping of the red dragon's wings caused further damage to the ancient capital that had been half destroyed for more than 2,000 years. The terrible storm caused by the flapping of the dragon's wings easily blew down all the buildings that were still relatively intact. The slightly older buildings were directly uprooted, and the loose walls made of mud bricks were blown into the air and disintegrated. In front of the palace, the defensive zone that had troubled the orc army for months was like a sandcastle that had been washed away by the waves. It was flattened in a few short breaths. Forgive me, the dragon's deep voice of repentance came from the sky in the common language. Along with this voice, Tirani's abdomen bulged, then its chest, and finally its neck. Dense golden flame patterns formed by the draconic language appeared in the air in front of the giant dragon. For a moment, this light even surpassed the light of the sun. A destructive flame quickly expanded from that small cluster into a huge fireball that was even bigger than the entire house. The golden light completely shrouded the entire royal palace of Torrent Fort. The grayish-black palace was doused with lava-like flames. In the screams of every Riptide Castle resident who witnessed this scene, the palace melted. The huge bluestone was like a piece of cheese that was melted by the high temperature. It began to flatten, and a blazing unknown substance spread in all directions. The symbol of Riptide Castle was gone. The ancient capital of the Arajuo Empire, which had been passed down for over 2,000 years, was gone just like that. Talanistas looked a little weak, but the orc on his back roared loudly. The pitiful ancient dragon had no choice but to pull himself together. He aimed at a huge cave and spat out what was left of his dragon breath. It was as if a terrible volcano had erupted in the underground pit. The narrow tunnels that restricted the orcs from entering became the graves of the humans. The doors and boulders that restricted the entry of enemies collapsed like dominoes. Not only Tyrannes, but the other red dragons also followed the orcs' orders and quickly found a deep pit, spitting their dragon breaths into it. This situation was a bit like a syringe. With enough pressure from one side, the flames spread along the tunnel to all the space in the mountain. King Salastrol Bane, who had just arrived at the wall of Saladin, fell to his knees. It wasn't just him. Every Stromgarde warrior saw the golden flames shooting out from the ventilation holes on the cliff of the mountain where Riptide Castle stood. How many of the people inside could survive? Was it a slim chance of survival? Or was it 1 in 100? No. Tears of despair rolled down the determined faces of these mountain men. They watched their motherland, the Stromgarde kingdom, sink into darkness and burn in flames. Their loved ones and compatriots cried and struggled in pain. For a moment, almost everyone in Riptide Castle felt that everything was destroyed, whether it was hope or the road ahead. Riptide Castle was destroyed. This was the second capital to be destroyed since the establishment of the Alliance. It was also the third capital of the 7 human kingdoms to fall. This news spread throughout the entire alliance within a day. The people of almost every surviving country trembled in fear. Among the remaining countries, only the Dalajan and Silvery Moon had the strongest magical defense. Perhaps they could withstand the destructive attacks of the giant dragons. But the rest were in doubt. Not to mention small countries like Kurtiras and Gilnis, even Lordaeron couldn't guarantee that they would be able to withstand it. For a moment, the urgency to save the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza reached an unprecedented peak. Every big shot of the Alliance was waiting for the results of Lordaeron's special forces. The results made all the big shots of the Alliance fearful. 48 human corpses were impaled by huge wooden stakes on the empty space outside the wall of Saladin. Looking at these human corpses wearing epic leather armor, most of the guards on the wall were at a loss. Only King Tyrena's Menethil was so angry that he plucked out a few tufts of his beard. Lordaeron's surprise attack had failed. It was a complete and utter failure. The high-level bandits that Tyrena's had sent were all killed. Not a single one managed to come back to report back to him. This was the most severe slap to Lordaeron's face. For a moment, Duque's act of saving himself and the Red Dragon Queen had attracted the attention of all the big shots of the Alliance. An uneasy feeling enveloped the Kirin Tor Council of 6. In the conference hall in the air, there were no walls. Large amounts of light and dark clouds surrounded these high-level mages, flowing and changing constantly. Looking up, it seemed that even time had become faster. Only the dark gray marble floor, which was inlaid with diamond-shaped runes that symbolized the 4 major elements, gave this scene some semblance of reality. At this moment, the fiercest debate broke out in the conference hall. These usually elegant and scholarly counselors were now even more rowdy than aunties in a wet market. I have no objections to supporting Duke Marcus. I have to admit that he's a great guy who can create miracles. But why did he name Ronan? Chapter 465. Ronan? A counselor shouted, "Ronan! Hasn't he killed enough of his own people? 5. 5 outstanding young Morning Star magicians died to his dangerous magic. He doesn't even have the right to wear a magician's robe anymore. He only brings danger, not hope. Even a goblin's bomb is more reliable than him. Another counselor agreed. Everyone knew that a goblin's bomb could explode at any time, even if it was disguised as a handsome man lying in an ice cave. If it was someone from before he transmigrated, it would be the new era's Should I Die Happy 7. Although I believe that His Excellency Marcus can suppress this maverick, aren't you afraid that he will kill His Excellency Marcus ahead of time by putting him together with our Alliance star? A slightly chubby member of Parliament muttered. Yes. We can't trust him. We can't let that criminal go. The first counselor echoed. From start to finish, only 2 people were silent, quietly watching the 4 counselors argue. Soon, they realized that the chairman and the 6th person were silent. Suddenly, the lively atmosphere began to cool down. Are you done arguing? Antonidas said leisurely, there are only 2 choices in front of us. The first is to gather all the strongest magicians in the Dalagan and Kuel Salis and kill Terranista. But I have to remind you that there is more than one ancient dragon in the Red Dragon army. Many of them are not controlled by the orcs and are hiding. Also, what role has the Red Dragon army played in the Tirisful Parliament for the past 1,000 years? The 4 counselors did not speak. The counselors of the Tirisful Parliament were all from the Silver Moon Parliament and the Kirin Tor Parliament. In the past 1,000 years, the Tirisful Parliament and its guardians had maintained a very good relationship with the red, blue, green, and bronze dragon races in terms of protecting the world. In a sense, the Red Dragon army was actually one of them. The second is to let Duke Marcus, who originally wanted to find Alexstrasza to save his life, carry out this perfect plan that can solve all problems in one go. I understand your concern for Sir Marcus, but, since he doesn't care about Ronan, why should we worry? Besides, I remember that we all owe Duque a favor. When Antonidas said this, the counselors all laughed dryly. That's right, these guys all had a share of the dragon skin and whatnot as casting materials. Of course, a certain counselor named Crassus didn't look too happy when he accepted the bribe. Crassus spoke, although Sir Marcus's name is a bit wrong, Ronan is not an earth wizard, but a morning star. However, this small detail isn't important. What's important is whether we can come up with a better remedy to increase the success rate of this operation. Antonidas suddenly laughed and said, didn't our deputy commander of the Alliance always suggest that in the battle against the Horde, apart from glory, we should also give material rewards to the real heroes who killed the enemy? Crassus immediately understood. The one who killed the most enemies in our alliance doesn't even have a staff. The old but experienced chairman chuckled, I can contribute an epic staff blueprint suitable for both Morning Star and Radiant Moon Magi. In fact, I even have a prototype that I can be proud of. Crassus continued, as for the cost, that's the Alliance's problem. We might as well set the standard higher. For example, killing 1,000 orc warriors to obtain this staff. Good idea. The other 4 counselors agreed. And so, the Alliance's first epic weapon to reward heroes was born. When Duque received the staff the next day, Duque was still a little confused. He blurted out. Grand Marshal's battle staff. Crassus was taken aback. Duke had called out the staff's name in one go. After all, they had come up with the name last night in the Kirin Tor Council. They had originally wanted to call it a hero's staff. However, they felt that it didn't match up to Duque's status, so they simply called it the Marshal's staff. The warrior version was called the Marshal's two-handed warblade, which was forged by the dwarves of Steel Furnace Castle. After all, anyone who could kill 1,000 orc warriors was definitely not a nobody. Being promoted to a general or something was a sure thing. The counselors didn't feel that it was an offense to any country. After all, it meant that a soldier who didn't want to be a marshal wasn't a good soldier. Who knew that Duque would say it out loud? Duque also realized that he had let it slip. Fortunately, he had a chance to fix it. He pointed at the draconic words on the staff. This is what the draconic words mean. Does this staff have another name? Krasis became embarrassed. Compared to the elven magic that humans worshipped, Krasis instinctively felt that the magic of the ancient dragon race was more authentic and original. In order to make the staff look high-end, Krasis added a paragraph of draconic words before handing it over. He thought that no one would understand, but who knew that Duque would say it out loud? Krasis was surprised and pleasantly surprised. Sir Marcus, you know draconic words? A little. A little. In reality, Duque didn't know **T. The system only translated 2 words for him. The truth of the matter was that the unique design of the staff had evoked the memories of a veteran player. The entire staff was white in color. The head of the staff was a chess-like horse's head, and on both sides of the horse's head was a pair of raised wings. There was a mysterious arcane power lingering at the tip of the staff, causing 4 white, mithril-shaped ornaments that looked like kite shields to revolve clockwise around the staff. Below it was a very Alliance-style ribbon, and then there was a brown handle and a translucent prismatic blue magic crystal at the end of the staff. Back in the day, before Duque traveled to this world, he had farmed countless days and nights on the battlefield to get this cool staff. Suddenly obtaining this magic staff, Duke actually had a kind of uncontrollable excitement. It was full of memories. My years. My youth. Ah, this reminds me of the days when I got the staff and ran towards the sunset in the wild, hunting down the horde. Kill. Or be killed. Honor kills, or be killed by honor kills. He still remembered the crazy days when a silly vice leader called Two Swords was killed by the horde at 3 in the morning while picking up girls in the game. Then, the guild mobilized 400 people to go online and fight the horde. He still remembered, ahem. I digressed. Once people traveled to another world, it was easy to recall the past. At this time, Krasis asked, Sir, do you have any special information about the Red Dragon Queen being captured? Chapter 466. Krasis was actually a little nervous. As one of the male dragons who admired Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, his heart was broken when his queen was captured and the entire Red Dragon army was controlled and enslaved by the filthy beast men. As an ancient red dragon, Alexstrasza's influence on his mind was not as great as that of other low-level red dragons. The premise here was that he did not contact the queen telepathically. In fact, many ancient red dragons avoided being enslaved by the beast men by deliberately avoiding telepathic contact. But recently, even without direct contact, Krasis could feel that his beloved queen was inevitably weakening, both mentally and physically. This was a bad sign. Krasis was very anxious. He contacted Duque to see what Duque needed. Secondly, he wanted to see if this Duque, who was known as the strongest commander in the Alliance and had almost earned the title of Mastermind, had any special information or ideas. After all, he had lost contact with the Red Dragon army and could only guess a lot of things. I don't have any accurate information. Almost as soon as Duque finished speaking, Krasis' face was filled with disappointment that could hardly be concealed. I see. Duke looked at Krasis' seemingly calm but incomparably disappointed expression. He stopped teasing Krasis. But there's still a direction. Huh? Can you tell me? I once witnessed Her Majesty Alexstrasza's heroism in Karazhan. So, from the beginning, I did not think that ordinary creatures could control the incomparably powerful Her Majesty. Makes sense. Krasis nodded. So, I flipped through the ancient books of Karazhan and found this record about the dragons. This is a very long story. In the ancient war, the races of Azeroth, led by the Pentashade Guardian, united to resist the invasion of the Burning Legion. The Pentashade Guardian even created an extremely powerful divine artifact that killed all the millions of demons of the Burning Legion in one go. When Duque said this, Krasis could not help but breathe faster. As the Red Dragon Queen's youngest admirer, as a young dragon, he had not experienced that earth-shattering battle. However, this did not prevent him from learning about it from his elders. Speaking of the war, there was one thing that couldn't be avoided. It was something that shamed the entire dragon race, the dragon soul, or more precisely, the devil's soul. I knew it was devil's soul, Krasis said through gritted teeth. Then he realized that he was too excited. Sorry, I was too excited. However, as an ally of the Red Dragon army for more than 1,000 years, it's a cruel thing for us to fight the Red Dragons. Duque smiled and pretended to understand. He continued, of course, this is just speculation. I wasn't sure. After all, I had to see the real thing to know. However, what I'm thinking is that if it's the demon's soul, I have to inform the other dragon kings to deal with this matter because I'm worried that this is a conspiracy by the Wing of Death, Nesario. The speaker had the intention, and the listener had the intention. Even if a certain red dragon still didn't know that the other party was a transmigrator who was even more of a fraud than a fraud, it still didn't prevent a certain dragon from having a good impression of fraud. Krasis became more and more certain that Duque had a very good chance of successfully saving Alexstrasza. Marcus, what are you going to do? Du shrugged. I'll just play it by ear. This answer made Krasis want to vomit blood. If it were someone else, Krasis would have definitely slapped them into the wall with Dragon Claw Swipe. However, the one in front of him was Duque, known as the most farsighted and wisest sage and commander in the entire alliance. Moreover, because the real dragons had an almost infinite lifespan, he had more spare time than other great mages to study trivial matters, such as the rise of Duque. Krasis found that Duque had the temperament of a fraud. In particular, Duque's ability to see through appearances was even rarer. The conspiracy that the Burning Legion's shaman had painstakingly hidden for hundreds of years was actually seen through by a young man. If this wasn't talent, then what was it? Even though it was a bit irrational, Krasis's intuition told him that betting on Duque was the right choice. Krasis bowed deeply to Duque. Thank you for your frankness, sir. You didn't have to tell me at all. No. You're also half a master to Ronan. I'm just telling you not to worry. Ronan. Krasis felt a bit strange when Ronan was mentioned. Even though he had been secretly training Ronan so that he could master the technique of sneaking into grim battle, he still felt strange when Duque suddenly asked for him. He forgot that a fraud was a fraud. Sorry, actually, I dreamt of Ronan and Her Majesty Alexstrasza. I think this is a sign from the goddess of fate. I did some research, and it turns out that there really is a mage named Ronan in the Dalajan, so Well, that's it. If you don't think it's suitable, I can give up on summoning Mage Ronan. Krasis was dumbfounded, but he soon accepted it. A sign of fate. Such a high-end and mysterious power. When Krasis connected the fact that Duque had miraculously defeated Sargeras, he couldn't help but wonder if Duque was the so-called child of fate. Alright, it just so happens that Ronan committed a crime. Even though he's currently in detention and under investigation, he's probably willing to use this method to prove himself. Not to mention that he's working with the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. I just hope that he won't be so careless and drag you down with him. Don't worry. I'm very good at instant casting, Ice Barrier. Krasis was speechless. The matter was settled. Half an hour later, in a room in a side tower of Violet Castle, a mage was waiting for his latest punishment. He looked about him with boredom. There was a brocade hanging on the thick stone wall in front of him. The violet area in the middle was embroidered with a complicated golden eye that seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. Below the eye were 3 golden daggers pointing to the ground. This flag of the Dalajan, this symbol, had always been raised high during the war, fulfilling their mission to protect the Alliance, even though not every Kirin Tor member fulfilled their mission with honor. He was a little anxious because the latest news was that he was actually connected to one of the Alliance's 2 heroes, Duke Marcus. He wasn't sure if this was a blessing. Chapter 467. Ronan raised his head and gazed into the distance with his deep green eyes under his thick red hair. There was a scar on his nose from a fellow apprentice, but no matter how skillful the culprit was, Ronan had never thought of fixing it. Even so, Ronan did not look ugly. He had a straight and elegant chin and a sharp face. His arched eyebrows made him look like he was full of sarcasm and suspicion. Most people were superficial. Before understanding the beauty of the other party's soul, they would often reject the other party from the bottom of their hearts because of the bad habits brought about by the appearance association. Ronan was treated the same way. His appearance had caused him trouble in communicating with the higher-ups more than once. Every time he tried to alleviate all of this, his ferocious expression and slightly exaggerated body language could only play a negative role in the situation. He wore an elegant midnight blue robe. His tall and handsome figure was very eye-catching, even to the mages. Ronan was silent. He had sacrificed 5 outstanding companions in the last mission. To him, who was waiting for an interrogation, any extra words would only make the accusations against him more severe. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at the door again, waiting for a mage to come in and speak to him. An interrogation, or a direct sentence from an important figure. The door, which seemed to be made of solid metal, disappeared without a sound. It was the same for a door made of magic. It was controlled by a magic program that normal mages could not understand. The Kirin Tor Parliament had used this cage system to imprison many criminals in the Violet Prison under the Dalajan. It had been like this for hundreds of years. The sudden light from the door made Ronan turn his head and close his eyes. But quickly, he opened his eyes and looked straight at the door. To his surprise, it was not the intimidating inquisitors and their assistants, nor was it Krasus, who was half his mentor. Instead, it was a young sorcerer with a tuft of silver hair. His hair did not look like it was dyed, but it did not match his young face. Ronan looked at the person who came. It was Duque. Duque was also sizing Ronan up. He saw a pair of deep green eyes that were as calm as a lake before a storm. There was no fear, no anger, and no hatred. He could clearly see the ugly scar on Ronan's nose, as well as the helplessness under that seemingly vicious expression. Not only that, it was hard to even find anger. This kind of incongruous feeling made it difficult for Duque to connect the person in front of him with the glorious Kirin Tor Archmage in history. This was the first time Duque had seen such an expression since he transmigrated. It was an expression that could only be seen after one had been abandoned by one's teacher, rebuked by one's peers, insulted by the world, and made enemies with the entire world. If it was an ordinary person, most of them would bend their back and lower their head in front of a high-ranking person, trying their best to show a humble and pitiful posture. But Ronan didn't. From the moment he opened the door until now, his posture had been as straight as a pine tree. He did not raise his chin, nor did he lower his gaze. He just calmly looked straight into Duque's eyes. That's right. Ronan was not afraid of death, nor was he afraid of being questioned. He was only waiting for the result of his trial. Was it eternal oblivion, or redemption? Hello, Ronan. My name is Duke Marcus. Nice to meet you. Duke Marcus. The 1.5-year battle at the Door of Darkness had made Duque's name known across the 2 continents. For the first time, Ronan was stunned. Why would such a famous person come to see him? My apologies, please forgive my stupidity, my lord. I don't understand how a sinner like me can help you, my lord. Or should I say, aren't you afraid of bringing misfortune upon seeing someone like me? Duque laughed. If it really is the power of the goddess of misfortune, perhaps anyone who looks at it will meet with misfortune. Duque replied, but your degree of misfortune is nothing to me, who has suffered the curse of the burning legions Sardras and only has a month left to live. If you can really bring misfortune, then I should be dying in front of you right now. Do you want to count down? 3, 2, 1. I'm dead. I don't think I'm dead yet. Looks like your misfortune is useless against me. Do you want to follow me for a while? Ronan was tongue-tied. He couldn't keep up with the thoughts of this person in front of him. He felt like he was losing his ability to think. When he had been imprisoned by the Kirin Tor internal affairs and dragged away like a bag of trash, he had thought that his terrible life as a wizard, or even this cursed life, was about to be liberated. But when the door opened, Ronan found out that what awaited him was not the result of execution or the destruction of all his magic circuits. He would be unable to use magic for the rest of his life. Instead, he was going to follow a person who only appeared in legends. Ronan was stunned. Duque scratched his head. Looks like my reputation isn't working. Then, for the sake of the Alliance, the humans, the dwarves, and the high elves, can you help me? This is a mission with a very high level of danger. When Duque said this, Ronan suddenly came to a realization. Ronan lowered his head for the first time and then quickly raised it again. There were a few more tears at the corner of his eyes. He shouted at the top of his lungs, I'm willing. I'm willing to do anything. I don't need to make any contributions. As long as I can wash away the sins on my body, so that I don't have to think about the faces of the victims' families every night, and make my heart feel better, I'm willing even if I have to die. Duque was stunned and then came to a realization. Azeroth's history still had its original momentum. But this was different from the original timeline. At the original timeline, Ronan had gone to save the Red Dragon Queen. That was after the war had ended and he had been imprisoned for a long time. At that time, Ronan had already calmed down, or perhaps his heart was dead. But now, after Ronan had committed a crime, he was in the most pain and his conscience was at its worst. It was as if he was in front of a cliff, unable to find his way out. Just as he was venting his pain, Duque had extended a simple wooden bridge to him from the other side of the cliff. Even though it looked unstable and had all sorts of questions, there was no doubt that this was Ronan's only salvation. Duque lowered his head and sighed, Ronan, if you follow me from now on, let me tell you why your magic always goes out of control. Chapter 468. What did it feel like to guide someone who was only half a step away from becoming a mage god? It felt good. It felt really good. It was like traveling to the past and teaching Edison how to invent and think about life. It was like teaching him to apply for a patent for his invention. If Ronan was a girl, it would be as bad as teaching a little girl who believed in Santa Claus to go to Mount Aquina to watch an old driver drive. Fortunately, Ronan was male. Just like that, Duque's rescue team was formed, carrying the will and hope of the entire alliance. This was not an exaggeration at all. Tyrannisa's frontal attack put a lot of pressure on the alliance. They wanted to gather their army and counterattack in one go, taking back the Arthi Highlands first. In the end, more than 200,000 troops were blocked by an ancient dragon at the Wall of Thoradin, unable to advance. If not for the Griffin Knights of the Wildhammer dwarves showing enough ferocity to fight, Tyrannis might have charged straight into the army camp behind the Wall of Thoradin and washed it with dragon breath. The ruler of the skies was just that domineering. Duque, Gavin Rad, Sasha, Ronan, and Marion Firewing who was forced into the team. This team of 5 seemed to be very low-key, but it had gathered quite a lot of big names. A deputy commander of the Alliance, a first-generation paladin, a ranger general, a future great mage, and a Silvermoon counselor. Why did you come? Duque asked Marion, the beautiful female high elf mage. For the future of the Alliance. Duke is such a young and promising member of the Alliance. If he were to die under some terrible curse, it would be such a pity. This would also damage the relationship between Kuel Salas and the Alliance. The Sun King and the Alliance agreed that only you are the best bridge between us and the Alliance. At this point, Marion rolled her eyes and continued, besides, isn't saving the beautiful queen from the hands of the evil and filthy orcs the standard template of a legendary story that can be sung and moved to tears? Is it wrong for me to want to be a part of the legendary story? Marion spoke confidently and righteously. But you don't have to sacrifice a Silvermoon counselor. Are we going to lose a deputy commander? She was so reasonable that Duque couldn't find any room to refute. We're going deep into the enemy's rear. No one will serve you. Duque, who had long heard of the debauched lifestyle of the High Elven mages, especially the Silvermoon Counselor, wanted to give them a heads up. I volunteered to join. Even if I die in the wetlands, it's my own business. There are many people in Silvermoon City eyeing my position, waiting for me to die there. Don't worry, I can take care of myself. I won't let them get what they want. A certain Dew could only pinch his nose and accept it. Let's hope Marion won't be a burden. It wasn't that Duque didn't believe in Marion's strength, but he wasn't sure of her actions. Just like that, the 5-man team set off. Because the entire earthy highlands and the wetlands across the sea belonged to the front line, it would be a joke to fly directly to grim battle on a griffin. After the discussion of the Alliance's bigwigs and staff officers, they decided to fly to the Stormwind fleet on the other side of the Paladin Bay. Then, when night fell, they would use a small boat to land on the west coast of the wetlands. Dreams were plentiful, but reality was harsh. Duque didn't expect that there could be conflicts between his own people and people from all over the world. Duque suddenly realized that wherever Marion was, Sasha would definitely sit next to him. It had been like this since they started riding griffins. Sasha insisted on riding with him no matter what, but in the end, Marion and Gavinrad shared the same griffin. It was even more so on the boat. Yes, like a mother bird protecting her chicks, she spread her wings and stared at the enemy, unusually vigilant. Sasha, we're all partners on missions together. No, Duque, you don't understand. This kind of woman is a scourge that eats people up without spitting out the bones. I'm going to watch over you in place of my sister. Sasha said this in front of Marion, giving her a provocative look. Marion didn't care at all. This is Windrunner's misunderstanding of the Silvermoon Council. No, Duque, Marion is one of the 7 sisters of the Silvermoon Salon, a famous socialite. If I had known that she was also a member, I would have firmly opposed it. It seems like you have a deep prejudice against me. In the salon, we discussed high art, including poetry and music, liar. Keep lying. Moreover, Sir Marcus didn't even set a marriage with your sister. Even if I wanted to pursue him, I would do it openly. With that, Marion giggled and puffed out her chest. It was a very sexy mage robe with a heart hollowed out at the chest. Just like that, it immediately revealed how shocking the deep ravine was. Moreover, so what if we have a marriage? We high elves don't pay attention to so-called etiquette. Polygamy, is also a very common thing. It's just that there can only be one who inherits the position and reputation of the elder. So, even if it's you, Sasha, you can still steal your sister's man. You're shameless. Sasha was furious. Especially when Sasha turned her head and saw that Ronan's eyes were a little straight, she only retracted her gaze with a red face when she saw it. Gavinrad. This noble wastrel holy knight didn't hide his admiration for Marion at all, in the form of whistling. Originally, for a moment, Sasha had lost all hope in Duque's willpower. However, the 2 ladies were stunned. Duque was very calm. He looked at Marion's pair of peaks, calm and serene, without excitement or embarrassment. It was as if he was admiring a passable work of art. Duque, why did you? Sasha was stunned. Duque blinked. This is a very common attire. That's right. This level of exposure can make a veteran of 10 terabytes of romantic action movies like me get excited and have a nosebleed. You're looking down on me too much. Even elementary school animals wouldn't freeze at this level. Yes, the righteousness on the face is to hide the filth in the heart. That's right. That's it. It just so happened that Mediv still had a lot of moral integrity left, and Duke now looked like a saint. Sasha was a little surprised. To avoid alarming the tribe, the ship chose to dock at night. A speedboat sent the group of 5 to the shore in the night, probably near the future Menethil port. Then, a group of sailors sent them and their horses ashore. After getting off the ship and stepping onto the shore of Cosmodan, the group entered an environment where beastmen walked everywhere and dragons flew in the sky. So, they bickered a little on the ship, but once they got off, everyone quietened down. Chapter 469. On the battlefield, the situation was extremely heated. After suppressing the alliance at the Saladin Wall, the Horde desperately needed a diversion to vent their anger. Of course, Orgrim found one. Of course, it was Gul'dan's betrayal. Orgrim immediately mobilized the two brothers, Rend Blackhand and Maim Blackhand, and led 50,000 men to chase after Gul'dan's Twilight Hammer and Storm Predator clans. Apart from that, there were also many Dragon Knights. The chairman was right, to defend against foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Orgrim did this in a comical manner. He wanted to quickly deal with Gul'dan, and then endure until winter. When more orcs came from the Dark Portal, he would regroup next spring and attack Lordaeron again. After all, with the Earthy Highlands as a bridgehead, there would be no need to fight those disgusting naval battles and land battles. If all else failed, they would open a road to the hinterlands through the high-altitude mountains between the Earthy Highlands and the hinterlands. It all depended on how the alliance defended the long front. Unfortunately, his opponent was Duke. Duke's goal was to kill as much as possible of the tribe's strength. Even when he was not here, there were still legends about him. Dooku was no longer around, but his plans still had epoch-making guidance. That's right, Orgrim's last 10,000 men did indeed cross the Alterac Mountains day and night to avoid the Alliance's pursuit. They crossed the entire hinterlands and returned to the Sea-Viewing Cliff. At the Sea-Viewing Cliff, Gul'dan did indeed destroy many ships, but there were still many left. After 3 days of hard labor, Orgrim finally managed to gather enough ships for 13,000 orcs and 1,000 trolls to cross the sea. Since he sent out the Blackhand brothers, Orgrim naturally wanted to return to the wetlands. After reorganizing the clans, he would regroup and stabilize the front line of the Earthy Highlands. Orgrim gritted his teeth and swore that he would learn from the humans and build a bunker. That's right. He would build a fortress on the east side of the Saladin Wall that the humans would have to sacrifice 100,000 lives to take down. Unfortunately, his grand plan was not realized before he suffered a heavy blow. Thinking about it, Duque knew that Orgrim could only return to the southern continent from the hinterlands, so how could he not have a backup plan? Moreover, it seemed like the heavens were not interested in protecting these foreign butchers of the Horde. Just half an hour after Orgrim's fleet set sail, they ran into a storm. In this day and age, any sailor with a modicum of experience would act according to the weather. Unfortunately, Orgrim's subordinates were all muscular men who relied on brute force to conquer the sea. They acted recklessly, and then they were punished. The gale raised a terrifying triangular wave that was at least 10 meters tall, easily capsizing all the small, newly built transport ships. Only the transport ships that were built earlier and in better condition barely survived the storm. However, after the storm subsided, Orgrim was ambushed by the Nagas and the Murlocs before he could even calculate his losses. Ha ha ha. In the name of our master, Duke Marcus, kill all those green-skinned creatures. Vara, the furious scale Naga priest, laughed heartily. Gala, kill all the orcs. Murloc prophet Morga yelled. Countless Murlocs rushed to the surface of the sea from the depth of 10 meters. The storm had little effect on the bottom of the sea. Basically, one could not feel the wind and waves 10 meters below the surface of the sea. Just now, the merfolk were simply picking up the human heads, drowning those who had drowned or those who had been thrown to the surface of the sea. Then, they cut off the heads and returned to the place designated by Duke to present the heads as a tribute. Now, countless Murlocs rushed to the surface of the water with crude weapons and climbed onto the low orc transport ships. They bullied the orcs who had been fighting against the storm for several hours and had exhausted their strength. They shook the not too wide orc transport ships, causing the orcs to lose their balance. On the shaking ships, the heavy weapons that the orcs were so proud of became a burden. One after another, the transport ships were captured by the Murlocs. No, Orgrim screamed at the top of his lungs. However, he could only watch the scene unfold from the flagship. There was nothing he could do. The great chief never thought that the last elites of the Blackrock clan would be buried here. After all, this was the last group of Blackrock orcs who had fought against the Draenei. They had rich experience and the strongest physique. They were the elites of the elites. They defeated the Draenei who played with the holy light. They were the vanguard of the expedition to Azeroth. They had killed more than 100,000 humans in the Elven Forest, killed the long-eared High Elves, destroyed Alterac, fought under Lordaeron, and attacked the North Camp of the Alliance. They had never surrendered to any enemy, but because they were not good at swimming, they were going to die here. Great Chief, let's go. Torghese of the Dragon Maw clan rode his dragon and swooped down at high speed. He let the dragon hover in the air. The dragon turned its snake-like neck and let out a threatening roar at the murlocs in the distance. Unfortunately, there was only one dragon, and it had followed to cover the great chief. A normal red dragon did not have the stamina to stay in the air for so long. Only a dragon over 1,000 years old could cast an anti-gravity spell on itself, allowing its huge body to hover in the air effortlessly. Great Chief, let's go. The damned murlocs are already digging at the bottom of the ship, Orgrim's personal guard captain, Embark, said. Dragons were the rulers of the sky, but not the king of the sea. No matter how strong the dragon's breath was, it could not evaporate the entire endless sea. As for the murlocs digging at the bottom of the ship under Maugre's command, the dragon could not do anything. No, I can't abandon you. Orgrim's eyes turned red as he looked at his brothers who had accompanied him for more than 10 years. No, you must abandon us, for the sake of the tribe. The orc warriors stared at Orgrim as if they weren't looking at their great chieftain, but at the last flickering flame of hope in the wasteland of despair and destruction. For the tribe. This sentence deeply pierced Orgrim's heart. It was not that these brothers of the Blackrock tribe did not know how terrible the situation was, nor did they not know who caused their world to wither and die, but they still silently raised their weapons and continued to fight. They did this for only one reason, for the tribe. Yes. They were wrong. They trusted the wrong ghoul, Dan. They also started a wrong war. But for the continuation of the tribe, they could only make mistakes again and again. But no one regretted it, because of the same reason, for the tribe. Chapter 470. Orgrim was agitated. Orgrim, who had returned to the wetlands alone, was almost in a frenzy. He mobilized all the resources at his disposal and launched an irrational attack on the Alliance. In Dan Moro, Orgrim mobilized 100,000 beastmen laborers, ignoring the harassment of the dwarven assault team and forcefully breaking open the mountain. If the Iron Forge relied on the entire mountain, then the tribe would use brute force to destroy the entire mountain. In the wetlands, Orgrim stayed in the grim battle fortress for 3 days. The news that came out was that the furious chief had the beastman warlock Necros inflict the cruelest soul torture on the Red Dragon Queen. In the end, Orgrim managed to squeeze out a few Red Dragon fighters who were in hiding. Karantaz, Gahiran, Kristesa, Hilstrasa. 2 males and 2 females. Unable to endure the faint waves of pain that their queen transmitted through her soul, the 4 dragons jumped out on their own and landed in the tribe's bowl. As a result, the tribe now had 5 ancient dragons, or at least close to the ancient level. These 5 giant dragons harassed the Alliance's defense line day and night. The entire Alliance was in a heated argument over whether or not to kill these red dragons who had become enemies. Did the Alliance have no backup plan? Definitely not. In a throne meeting at the command center near South Shore, King Salas of Stromgarde, whose country had officially been destroyed, was furious. Bang! 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 He slammed the table. Those damned red dragons have fallen into the abyss of evil. I don't want to hear anything about being kind. The truth is that these giant lizards went crazy for their queen. They burned down our home and our capital. 5 dragons. They are enough to destroy every city on this road except for Dalajan and Silvery Moon. Every one of them understood Salas's rage. King Lang and General Haas, whose country had also fallen and their capital destroyed, resonated deeply. King Xian Grayman of Gilneas was the most shocked. Among the remaining alliance capitals, his home was the weakest and closest. What are we waiting for? If we gather all the advanced mages from the Dalajan and Kuel Salis, we won't have any problem killing these dragons. Antonidas and Prince Kael'thas, who was attending the meeting as a representative, had the darkest faces. In the end, it was Antonidas who spoke. If they are willing to land and fight us, we can still kill these 5 red dragons. There are 2 problems. First, will they obediently land on the ground and bombard us? Everyone's expression turned ugly. Secondly, before you make this decision, please take a look at the list of dragons we have collected about the Red Dragon Legion. I must remind you that this list is not complete. There were 40 to 50 red dragon names displayed on the projection screen. Half of them were male and half were female. At the end of the name, the age of the dragon was also roughly stated. Dragons were divided into 12 levels according to their age, starting from the weakest hatchlings to the archaic dragons like Alexstrasza, also known as the strongest guardian dragons of the primordial dragons. Basically, for pure-blooded dragons, age was a symbol of strength. Looking at such a large group of dragon brothers, sisters, and sisters, from the very old to the primordial dragons, even the most arrogant king would lose his temper. Then what do we do? Wait for death one by one. The old Xian spread his hands in despair. If Duque can save the Red Dragon Queen. Anduin Lothar whispered. Kudrin Wildhammer shouted, isn't it just a fortress? Find a cloudy night with no moonlight, I'll gather all the Wildhammer dwarves and mount a griffin for a surprise attack. Crasus, who was beside Antonidas, finally couldn't help but speak. Please, do you think that Queen Alexstrasza, who participated in the primordial war and killed tens of thousands of demons, is tied up in a fortress by a thumb-thick chain, waiting for you to rescue her? Then what's going on? Dwarves had always been the negative example of the word patient. Kudrin had a look of, I'll give you 10 seconds to solve the riddle, and if you don't tell me the answer, I'll flip the table. Crasus added, Sir Marcus isn't very sure himself, but he has a direction. Crasus didn't dare to say the word demon's soul because he had a bad feeling, as if someone was manipulating Alexstrasza's fall. What the hell, in the end, we still have to trust that brat Duque? King Xian muttered. King Terinas narrowed his eyes. Our vice commander has always done a good job. Why can't we trust a hero who has proven himself to the world? During this period of time, the cleanup of the horde in the Tirisful Glades was quite effective. There were already 15,000 orcs who had their heads chopped off. Tashin's orc head at the north gate of Lordaeron was not a lie. Humph. Xian snorted, tacitly agreeing. The big shots of the Alliance still felt quite helpless. They didn't expect that in the end, they could only rely on Duque. How ironic. Hundreds of thousands of troops couldn't advance, and they could only wait for a young man who might die to save himself, the whole alliance, and the whole world. Duke wasn't too clear about what was going on in the outside world. He could only understand what was going on in the outside world through magic communication when he stopped to set up camp. Duque didn't dare to send too many messages, he was afraid that he would be detected. Some dragons were quite sensitive to magic fluctuations. He wasn't sure how many dragons in the Red Dragon army were actually working for the orcs, or were just doing their jobs. Duque didn't dare to take the risk. For days had passed. In this wetland full of swamps, the biggest threat was nothing more than annoying mosquitoes. Don't think that rolling around on the grass on a summer night is very romantic. When the mosquitoes swarmed you within a few minutes and stung all your exposed skin, you wouldn't be able to cry even if you wanted to. Of course, as a college student with some common sense, he prepared garlic and sulfur in advance. Garlic repelled mosquitoes, and sulfur repelled snakes and bugs. While Windsor was a ranger, she loved nature. Mosquitoes were a woman's natural enemy. At first, only Duque and Marion used their tents. Later, in order to save sulfur, Marion and Duque's tents were next to each other. Windsor, on the other hand, squeezed into Duque's tent. Don't think that anything could happen. With so many third wheels around, you could turn around and everyone would know. If you didn't look at the terrible swamp nearby, the constantly changing scenery made the journey quite poetic. Thanks to the swamp that could swallow people whole, the orcs weren't as vigilant as expected. Chapter 471. Ronan, I actually think that your teacher is a bit lousy. While resting, Duke was hiding under the shade of a tree as he complained. No, teacher treats me very well. Being abandoned by his teacher was a pain in Ronan's heart. He could not describe the feeling of being abandoned by the entire world. He answered Duque's question with an argument that even he could not convince himself. No, I mean, didn't he see the structure of your magic circuit? He actually gave you such a trashy magic circuit model. It's a miracle that you were able to reach the Morning Star realm. Ronan was shocked. Luo Ning was shocked. He had only cast spells twice and revealed the magic circuits on his arm. The magic circuit that could be seen on the skin was only the tip of the iceberg of the magic circuit in a wizard's body. It was only about 1%. How could Duque say that it was a miracle that he was able to reach the Morning Star realm? Ronan did not believe Duque alone, but before Duque, Crasus, who was like half a teacher to him, had told him so. Ronan was conflicted. If Ronan was said to be hesitant at first, then Duque's next words shocked him. Did you realize that while others could operate the arcane magic circuit in the same way without any problems, when you used it yourself, the arcane energy would rush out like a wild horse? Yes. Ronan, who was sitting on the ground, lowered his head, almost burying it between his knees. His appearance made Duque feel awkward. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a dog that had lost its owner. To be honest, Marion, who had not paid much attention to Ronan, did not understand why Duque would care so much about a wizard with such poor skills and no future. In Marion's eyes, even a high elf apprentice would be better than Ronan. Ronan's chaotic arcane aura was not surging, but it was always in a state of activation. It reminded Marion of those idiots who had absorbed too much energy from the Sunwell and self-destructed. Marion was waiting to watch a good show. Duque's decision, however, was unexpected. Do you want to try my magic circuit model? It came from Antonidas, but I modified him a little. Luo Ning was stunned. Marion was stunned as well. The magic circuit model was one of the mage's greatest secrets. The strength of a mage was directly related to his magic circuit. Duque actually gave it away just like that. Duque softly chanted an incantation and transferred a series of runes and circuit models into Luo Ning's mind in the most direct way. Almost at the same time, Ronan let out a fanatical cry of surprise. The more complicated a magic circuit was, the better it would be. Of course, the simpler it was, the more useful it would be. The most important thing was that it had to be suitable for him. A person with heart disease would not be able to ride the fiercest horse. Similarly, a person with insufficient aptitude should obediently ride the slowest horse, or even a donkey. Ronan's mouth was wide open. It was the arcane throne. Ronan wasn't strong, but he didn't lack insight. He almost instantly recognized that this model was definitely from Antonidas. He lightly simulated it in his mind and immediately confirmed that it was the arcane throne of Antonidas, the chief archmage. But it was also different. Antonidas was most famous for his ice magic, so his arcane throne was the foundation of Ice Crown. The arcane throne that Ronan obtained, however, abandoned all external output and completely used arcane magic to serve arcane magic. Luo Ning was inexplicably shocked and cried out, Duque, how did you know that I'm most proficient in arcane magic? Duque smiled. I could tell at a glance. Well, from Snowstorm Daddy's description of you, he could tell at a glance. This gift is too precious. Duque, however, shook his head. First of all, this isn't the complete arcane throne. This is just a model to inspire you and provide you with reference. I'm just giving you some pointers so that you can see your own path clearly. Your previous model was too lousy and couldn't make use of your characteristics at all. Those guys also overemphasized the skills of controlling magic, which is a waste of your talent. Talent? Yes. The magic output of your arcane circuit is at least 50 times that of a mage of the same level, so when you cast spells, you only feel that your magic power suddenly rushes out, and all the skills you learned are useless. The result is loss of control and explosion. For example, your arcane impact with one layer is like someone else stacking 10 layers, and the effect becomes arcane explosion. Luo Ning raised his head and stared at Duque in shock. He was completely stunned. Duque pointed out the crux of his problem, leaving no room for him to refute. Then I need to, Duque said earnestly, first of all, you need to get used to your magic power output. Just use it as powerful as possible. If you can use Arcane Missile Storm, don't use Arcane Missile. If you can use Arcane Explosion, don't use Impact. Then, you can slowly adjust your magic circuit and find the balance between power and control. Then is there any way? No, you have to find your characteristics first. You have to know who you are. Only by understanding your abilities and talents in all aspects can you start to find the direction of your development. That is the path that belongs to you. All the magic training in the Daligen is actually just a method. However, that method is for ordinary magic apprentices and mages. It's not for you, who is too talented. I understand. Luo Ning stood up and bowed deeply to Duque. You always failed because you used the wrong method. The method varies from person to person. Only by following the path that belongs to you can you find the method that suits you. But the method that suits you doesn't necessarily mean that you will reach the end of the magic path. After all, everyone's destination is completely different. Duque raised his hand lightly. In an instant, 9 magic energy balls appeared above Duque's head. Arcane, Ice, and Fire. 3 different types of power merged harmoniously in Luo Ning's hand, turning into 3 Frostfire arcane energy balls. Everyone could feel the shocking destructive power contained in these small balls. However, no one could feel the power spreading from a distance. Under Luo Ning and Marian's gazes, Duque stopped the fusion and cycle of magic, slowing down the entire cycle. The terrifying power dissipated silently, and the surrounding magic waves quickly calmed down. After 3 breaths, not a single trace of magic could be seen in the air. After you recognize yourself, I can discuss the way of control with you. Chapter 472. Sasha was about to go crazy. On one hand, she couldn't contact her 2 sisters. If Aurelia and Cervantes received the message, they would definitely rush over as soon as possible. However, the message she and her rangers sent to Tirisful Forest was like a stone sinking into the ocean. She wasn't worried about her 2 sisters' safety. In her heart, as long as they entered the forest, they would be the strongest. It was obvious that they were being held back by a target. If she guessed correctly, it had to be Grom Hellscream. Her 2 sisters were still brooding over the fact that they couldn't take down that fierce orc even after working together in the first battle of Southshore. Their stubbornness caused Duque to lack powerful supporters. On the other hand, if Duque and the other 3 guards remained silent from start to finish, Sasha wouldn't feel troubled. If they focused their thoughts on the dangerous mission that they were about to face, Sasha wouldn't feel troubled. The problem was that Duque's journey was too leisurely. If one ignored the fact that this was enemy territory, there would be at least 7 or 8 waves of flying dragons flying overhead every day. This was like an outing. Ever since they'd come ashore, they'd only traveled a little more than 120 kilometers in 4 days. This was even slower than the normal marching speed of a human army. The swamp terrain was a little difficult to walk on. At least there were many paths that were obviously made by orcs. These paths led in all directions. As long as they headed east, they definitely wouldn't lose their way. However, Duque just rode on his horse, joking with Marian and Gavin Rad. He occasionally gave Ronan some pointers, but he refused to speed up. Everyone could see that Duque's hair was getting whiter by the day. The small tuft on his forehead turned white at the temples. Sasha also accidentally saw that the skin on the inside of Duque's left arm was starting to wrinkle like an old man's. Sasha finally couldn't take it anymore. She pulled Duque behind a small hill and said, "Duque, did you notice? Your hair is rapidly turning silver. Isn't silver good? Silver is quite pretty. Look, don't you have silver hair too?" Duque seemed to be joking as he played with a strand of Sasha's silver hair. This was supposed to be a very intimate act. Normally, Sasha would have minded it, but she couldn't care less now. "Are you still joking? Duque, why aren't you nervous at all? Your life is counting down." On Duque's face, there was an enigmatic calmness that Sasha could not imagine. "I don't know what you think of this war. I think that since I joined the Alliance's army, the moment I joined, every Alliance soldier should be mentally prepared to sacrifice themselves. Yes, I was afraid of it too, and I didn't want to die in agony after being tortured. But since I'm shouldering the future and fate of the three races with Noxus, I can't show timidity in front of my subordinates. But, shouldn't we hurry to Grim Battle Fortress?" The beautiful silver-haired elf waved her tender arms agitatedly, using her body language to express her unease and dissatisfaction. "Or, do you know some important information that you don't think I have the right to know?" Sasha's subtext was, "Duque, do you think I'm not as good as my sisters?" Duque sighed. To be honest, Sasha was indeed not as good as her two sisters now. Aurelia and Servanas, who had become ranger generals a long time ago, had rich battle experience. They were great talents who could take charge on their own. Because the Silver Moon Council did not want the Windrunner family to have too many ranger generals, Sasha had always been a small ranger captain. Now, Sasha had the best talent, but she lacked experience. Right now, Sasha's abilities were far from what she had been when she had become the boss of the Silver Alliance. Sasha, who was taking charge of a mission for the first time, was a little impatient and had the patience to observe problems. Duque could not bear to disappoint her. "It's not about whether I have the right or not. It's just that I don't know how to break out of this situation." "Break out?" Duque seemed to sense something. He waved at Sasha and asked her to move her ear closer. Sasha hesitated for a moment, but she immediately did as he said. Even though she believed that even if Duque spoke softly, her sharp hearing would be able to catch Duque's words, Sasha had seen Duque whisper to her elder sister before. She was very curious and felt that it was a form of intimacy and acknowledgement. Yes, acknowledgement from a very great human commander. However, after moving closer and sticking her ear closer, Sasha regretted it a little. Duque's soft breath tickled her pointy ear. It was a strange and numb feeling that she had never felt before. The breath of an adult man caused her slender and beautiful neck to be dyed a crimson red. She tried hard to hold it in, and secretly activated her wind power to interfere with any possible eavesdroppers. Then, Duque's words were indeed very important. "Yes. The Red Dragon Queen's capture is part of a continuous plot related to the internal strife of the dragons. If I'm not wrong, the Red Dragon Queen was controlled by the artifact that was attached to her power and soul, the demon's soul, that was transformed from the dragon's soul. This matter was most likely the doing of the legendary Black Dragon King, Deathwing. I'll think of a way to attract Nisario's attention and make our team part of his plot." Sasha had always been curious and intelligent. She had read about the ancient war in ancient books. However, Duque actually wanted to dance on the claws of the scheming Black Dragon King, and then use the sinister and cunning Deathwing? That's too daring, isn't it? According to Sasha's calculations, unless Deathwing rushed to the Well of the Sun and courted death, even with all the power of Kuel Salus, they might not be able to kill this ancient Dragon King. Sasha's sexy red lips opened wide in surprise. She suddenly understood why Duque moved as if he was on a field trip. However, isn't this too obvious? Or is it not obvious enough to attract Deathwing's attention? What if Deathwing isn't monitoring this area? Sasha's mind was in a mess. How can I achieve the effect you want without leaving any traces? Just as Duque was about to say something, a loud noise came from the team. Under Duke and Sasha's astonished gazes, one or more beastmen's broken limbs flew into the air, and the cause of this effect was an incomparably huge ball of arcane energy. Sasha couldn't help but shout, "Ronan, you idiot!" Chapter 473. At first glance, it looked like a wizard casting an arcane explosion spell, the huge purplish-blue ball of light expanding at high speed. However, it was clear that it was actually a huge turbulent flow of arcane energy in the form of an arcane missile. After destroying the target it was supposed to attack, this huge ball of arcane energy suddenly flashed and crashed into another hill in the distance. Break! 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 The violent arcane energy turned into countless blue arrows of light, turning the entire hill into a sieve. Gravel flew everywhere, and the dust settled in the damp breeze unique to the wetlands. It was no wonder that Sasha was so agitated. The intense undulations of arcane energy told the red dragon in the sky that something big had happened. The dragons knew how much damage a Morning Star wizard could cause, and would not ignore it. In this era where illiterates were everywhere, some might know that human magic came from the High Elves, but very few knew that the dragons were the ancestors of magic. In ancient times, when the creation titans had arranged for the 5 dragons to become the dragon protectors of the world of Azeroth, they had arranged for the oldest blue dragon king, Malygos, to be the protector of magic. The other dragons had their own characteristics, but they were all very sensitive to magic. As Sasha cursed, she took out the longbow on her back with dazzling movements and nocked an arrow. The orc that had just been killed was obviously not worthy of Sasha's vigilance. The enemy came from the sky. Ronan, who had just finished pouring out his magic, had yet to recover from the violent but overly effective magic attack when he suddenly felt a shiver pass through his body. The feeling scared him so much that he almost jumped up from the ground. Something was approaching. He raised his head to look at the sky, only to see thick, gray, cotton clouds. "Idiot, hurry up and leave." Gavin Rad grabbed the collar of this troublemaker and dragged him onto his horse. Ronan's face was pale. He realized that he had messed up again. Just because of a few orc laborers lying in ambush in a mud hole beside the swamp, he had alarmed the god of death in the sky. Trying to keep his head up on the back of the jolting horse, he saw an invisible ripple in the eastern sky, spreading out in all directions with something at its center. It was a little like a drop of water falling on the surface of water, creating a circle of ripples, only more violent. The clouds were violently torn apart. What followed was a thunderous ripple that caused Luo Ning to open his eyes wide in shock. Immediately after, a terrifying roar came from the sky. Luo Ning's body involuntarily tensed up as a black shadow broke through the clouds and rapidly expanded in his vision. In just a few seconds, the ground nearby was shrouded by a huge shadow. A deafening roar erupted in the sky, tearing through the atmosphere like a hurricane. Ronan struggled to sit on the horse's back and turned his head to look at the sky. Unfortunately, this time, he saw a scene from hell. A giant dragon covered in flames filled the sky, grabbing Ronan's warhorse that was still struggling and neighing in its front claws. Ronan's meticulously prepared bags of supplies kept falling off the warhorse's back. This dark red giant swallowed the rest of the food on its claws and locked its gaze on the small and pitiful human below. On its shoulder sat a ferocious-looking green monster with long fangs and a battle axe in its hand. It pointed at Ronan and let out an ear-piercing roar, as if giving an order to the giant dragon. The dragon roared and extended its claws, diving towards him. "Damn it! You jinx!" Gavin Rad cursed. He did not hide his hatred for Ronan at all. Even though Ronan was not facing the Holy Knight, he could still feel the Holy Knight's anger. It was no wonder that Gavin Rad was angry. Ronan was a troublemaker. If he did not provoke him, he would be a young dragon that was over 1,000 years old. According to the reports, this was the strongest red dragon in the entire wetlands. All the older dragons with independent names had gone to attack the Hillsbrad foothills. It couldn't get any darker. Awala, Malasada. At this moment, Marion Firewing, who was not far from them, released an even more violent chain of spells. A huge ball of chaotic ice energy the size of a carriage condensed in front of Marion's left palm. Unlike Ronan's berserk magic, Marion displayed her powerful control as an advanced magus. The sound of wind whistling could be heard. Unlike Ronan's berserk magic, Marion displayed her powerful control as an advanced magus. Not only did the ice arrows form a net that enveloped the Crimson Dragon, but they also had a clear arc as they shot out. Marion was actually able to adjust the angle of the attack after the spell was released to maximize the hit rate. The giant dragon that was already in a diving state was indeed worthy of its title as a 1,000-year-old dragon. It seemed like it could not change its direction at all, but with just a flap of its wings, it suddenly climbed more than 30 meters. If Marion's ice arrows, which had a greater range than Blizzard, could self-adjust, the giant dragon might have dodged them. Even so, the giant dragon still managed to dodge most of the ice arrows. As for the remaining small portion, the giant dragon directly used its dragon breath to cancel them out. Except for two, it was obvious that these two ice arrows were Marion's greatest trump card. They looked exactly the same on the surface, but contained at least 10 times the ice element of an ordinary ice arrow. Not only was it powerful, it could also accelerate. A moment ago, it was as fast as a bird, but in the next instant, it had turned into 2 shooting stars that shot at the orc on the dragon's back. How could a mere dragon maw orc withstand the attack of a veteran Radiant Moon mage? In a breath's time, the orc had already turned into an ice sculpture. Just the tremors of the giant dragon's ascent had already caused the ice sculpture to crack and crumble, turning into ice crystal dust that dissipated in a few breaths' time. Unfortunately, this was already the limit of what Marion could do. If it was a head-on battle on land, the victor would only be known after the fight. However, an elven mage who could not fly against a giant dragon that could freely soar and perform all sorts of tactical maneuvers would only put Marion at a disadvantage. Even though Duque had rushed over and fired a barrage of arcane missiles at the giant dragon, it was still unable to stop the giant dragon from soaring into the sky. The giant dragon circled around 300 meters in the air, its terrifying yellow pupils carefully sizing up the 3 mages below. Apologies, Alliance mages, I have to report your existence to Necros. The pupils of everyone in the team of 5 shrank. Chapter 474. Unlike the others, Duque completely ignored Ronan. The dragon's figure was reflected in his eyes. But whether it was Ronan or the dragon, Duke didn't really care about either of them. What Duque cared about was Deathwing. If he couldn't attract Deathwing's attention and get the Black Dragon King's interest, then it would be useless no matter what he did. There wasn't a single warlock in the entire alliance. Apart from warlocks, no one could use the artifact Demon's Soul. Even if Duque was a warlock, he wouldn't use such a method to take control of Alexstrasza. Of course, how to deal with the current situation was also a problem. A young dragon with a body length of 23 or 24 meters and a wingspan of almost 20 meters. If they left it alone, just the fact that it wouldn't come down and was circling in the sky like a demon to summon the dragon was enough for the team of 5 to suffer. After Sasha arrived, she tried to use the ability she obtained from the Storm Altar to aim at the dragon's eyeball. She failed. 300 meters above the ground, the flow of the wind had become extremely chaotic. She had indeed awakened the power of wind, but that was more of a control over the wind. It wasn't like her elder sister who strengthened herself with the storm. One shouldn't think that a dragon's eyeball was easy to damage just because it was a weakness. As long as a dragon was more than 1,000 years old, its transparent eye membrane would be as hard as steel. Sasha bit her lower lip and said in a clear voice, "If anyone has a way, it's best if you use it now." Everyone first looked at Marion. She was the best fighter among the 5. But the Radiant Moon Mage spread her hands. "It's too far." Everyone noticed that Marion said it was too far, not that they couldn't fight. Then, everyone ignored Ronan, who was at a loss of what to do, and ignored the short-handed Holy Knight. They focused their attention on the core of the team, Duke. Duke looked at the red dragon circling in the sky and asked Sasha, "Can you help me guide my magic?" "How?" "I need you to blow the elemental particles from my body onto that big lizard." Sasha was no fool. She was smart enough to immediately understand what Duque meant. Putting aside the power of the spell, just the fact that the direction of the wind could change at any moment made it difficult for the spell to hit a target more than 100 meters away. In fact, in a large-scale war, there was no way to coordinate the power of so many pharaoh mages without a large-scale mana amplification magic array. What Sasha had done was actually some sort of amplification. Even if they did not know how to use magic, the High Elves were still very sensitive to the flow of elemental power. Not bothering to avoid suspicion, Sasha pressed herself against Duque's back and pointed at the giant dragon 300 meters in the air. A gentle breeze blew from their backs, and their silver hair fluttered in the wind, gently caressing Duque's face. The eyes of the three people beside them were transfixed, because in that instant, they vaguely felt that the hair colors of the two were unexpectedly the same. In the scene before their eyes, the two figures seemed to have blended beautifully. Even with a beauty hugging him from behind, Duque did not have the time to be distracted. He carefully sensed the trajectory of the fire elemental particles that he had released. In his retina, he could see the system elf rapidly calculating the trajectory of the shot with a 3D model. Wind direction, wind speed, fire elemental particles, all the data flashed in Duque's mind. This time, Duque raised his right hand, which was under Sasha's jade arm. Their arms overlapped. Duque then raised his left hand and placed it on Sasha's right arm. He softly chanted an incantation, and a fireball the size of a basin condensed in front of their fingertips. The fireball was very small, so small that it was about the size of a magic apprentice who had just learned fireball. With a soft bang, the fireball flew out. Amateurs enjoyed the show, while experts appreciated the artistry. Gavin Rad was just an onlooker, but Marion and Ronan's eyes were glued to the small fireball. The fireball shot up into the sky with an eye-catching tail of flames. If it were a magic apprentice's fireball, it would probably dissipate after flying 30 meters. Duque's fireball was different. Although it looked like a bonfire in a brazier, the two realized that Duque's fireball did not dissipate at all after climbing 50 meters. There were still as many fire elemental particles after flying 50 meters. 100 meters passed. 200 meters. 250 meters. Only then did the fireball visibly shrink. It was not a visual reduction, but the elemental energy it contained had shrunk. At first, the dragon soaring in the sky had only roared to inform its compatriots to come help. It did not care about the fireball at all. From the dragon's point of view, human magic beyond a certain distance was just like the fireworks they played with, purely for show. It was wrong. The fireball still did not dissipate. Instead, it was getting closer and faster. It actually accelerated twice. Roar! The red dragon was furious. Using a fireball in front of a red dragon that specialized in fire was a provocation in itself. Not to mention that the small fireball looked like it could really hit it. Whoosh! Without hesitation, the red dragon spat out dragon breath in an attempt to melt the fireball. Something strange happened again. The small fireball actually made a turn in the air, drawing a dazzling arc, bypassing a large area of the dragon's breath. Then, it accelerated a third time, and finally, the fireball smashed into the giant dragon's lizard face. Red dragons were naturally resistant to fire. The fireball did not do much damage. But it was a slap in the face. In the truest sense, it was a slap in the face from all angles and connotations. Most red dragons did not have good tempers. Not bothering to wait for reinforcements, the 1,000-year-old red dragon flapped its wings and swooped down from the sky. It wanted to teach these insignificant humans who dared to challenge its dignity an unforgettable lesson. As the dragon swooped down, everyone looked at Marion. This powerful counselor of the Silver Moon Council immediately displayed the power of a radiant moon great mage. Complicated arcane energy patterns that were difficult for outsiders to understand spread under her feet. The arcane energy condensed into lines that formed a magic array that was 10 meters in diameter and looked like a work of art in itself. Every inch of the magic array was flowing with mana at a high speed, constantly revolving at a high speed. Then, when the dragon swooped less than 50 meters from the ground, countless magic tentacles that looked like hooks suddenly appeared and netted the dragon. Chapter 475. It would be a joke to use magic to suppress a dragon that was known for its strength. Binding only needed to be controlled at the critical moment. The huge purple-blue energy arrow that Marion had condensed as much arcane energy as possible shot out from her arm that was held horizontally in front of her chest. A huge arrow over 5 meters long pierced through the air and shot towards the dragon. The dragon demonstrated to the team of 5 the terrifying power and superb control of the dragon. It had actually used some sort of berserk sorcery to expand its body by 30%, which was followed by an even more terrifying power. Pft, pft, pft. The tentacles that were made of magic made a crisp sound. In the blink of an eye, the dragon flapped its wings again and leaped 5 meters into the air. This was the 5 meters of life and death. At this pace, Marion's ultimate spell would not hit. At this moment, Sasha made her move. Beauty like a pine tree. Bow like a full moon. 2 sharp arrows, enhanced by the power of the wind, shot straight at the crimson behemoth's head. 50 meters was not a short distance. It should have been faster than Marion's magic and hit the dragon's eyes first. However, the dragon's head suddenly moved at the moment of impact. A moment later, the arrow did not hit the target that Risa had expected. Even though it did not hit the dragon's eyes, the 2 arrows that contained Sasha's full power still injured the dragon's eyelids. Roar! It was an unbearable cry of pain. This could only blind it, not kill it. At this moment, no one noticed that Duque had used the swamp beside him to stack arcane impact. Most mages could stack 4 to 5 layers of arcane impact, at most, but Duque had stacked it up to 12 layers. And he was using both hands, stacking 12 layers of arcane impact. The future Archmage Ronan was dumbfounded, and Marion, who was at the peak of the mystical domain and second only to the 2 kings of magic, was even more shocked. This control. Was Duque still human? The first arcane impact was released, but it didn't hit the dragon directly. Instead, it hit the left wing. Duque did not expect it to severely injure the giant beast. To the scales and thick skin of a 1,000-year dragon, a Morningstar wizard's magic was no different from a human's ordinary sword. It was a laughable method of attack. However, the impact from arcane impact instantly broke the balance of the giant dragon while Sasha was blinded. The entire dragon was flipped over 45 degrees. The second wave of arcana techniques was unleashed. This was the real deal. A huge ball of arcane energy exploded on the dragon's head. It was as if an invisible and untouchable 100-meter-tall giant had clenched his fists and punched down from above. There was a rumbling explosion in the air. In the next second, the entire dragon was blasted down by this powerful impact. No more, no less. It was exactly 5 meters. This scene was very, very funny. It looked like a frog trying to jump out of a pot of boiling water, but halfway through, it was covered by a lid and had no choice but to fall back into the pot. This kind of coordination was something mortals could not imagine. It was as if the god of fate had said that the next step was for you to die. No matter how careful you were, how you dodged, or how you defended, you still fell for it. It was a mystical force that almost reached the level of fate. But Duque did it. Without Sasha and Duque's coordination, Marion's all-out attack would have sent the dragon flying laughably. With little mana left, Marion could only wait for death. But with the 2 of them, the dragon was like prey that had fallen into a trap, unable to struggle. Poo. This was the sound of a sharp blade cutting through flesh. The magic arrow passed through the snake-like neck. The top half went in, the bottom half came out, and the chest pierced through the heart, finally emerging from the dragon's back. Asterisk bang. Asterisk this was the sound of a second explosion after the violent elemental force entered the dragon's body. A radiant moon great wizard. This was a power that was second only to the two strongest kings of magi. It finally exploded in the dragon's body, wantonly destroying its internal organs. The dragon's powerful life force was still supporting it. But the intense pain from its neck and lower body, as well as 1,000 years of battle experience, told this young dragon that it was destined to die. This was beyond the limits of what its body could endure. The huge and powerful heart was still beating vigorously. But the dragon's blood that should have been pumped out into the arteries began to spread from the heart due to the destruction of the ventricles. The dragon's blood, which mortals viewed as a treasure, shot out from the dragon's body that had already fallen 30 meters into the air. At this moment, no one in the team of 5 had the time to feel the joy of killing the dragon. They were shocked to see that the dragon's chest had already swelled up, and there was a clear, piercing red light between its ribs like the sun. The dragon was going to go all out. It wasn't just the dragon's breath. The dragon's entire body started to scoop towards the team of 5. This was a dragon's breath at 0 distance. The faces of the 5 in the team were all pale. Dragons had reverse scales. Touching it would enrage them. Now, it wasn't just a reverse scale. You wanted the dragon's life, it would be strange if you didn't drag it down with you. Time seemed to freeze. A distance of 30 meters could be covered in the blink of an eye for a dragon. No matter what decision he made, it was an instantaneous reaction. Gavin Rad, who had been watching the show, activated the paladin's invincibility. The power of holy light burst forth, and he turned himself into a giant golden egg. At least at the last moment, he stood in front of Duque. He got into a horse stance, raised his hammer, and assumed a defensive stance. Ronan and Marion were both mages. They flashed as far away as they could, followed by a beautiful ice barrier. Yes, these two opened the fridge. Only now did Sasha realize that her teammates were all shameless hooligans. 1 invincibility, 3 fridges. All of them could save themselves at critical moments. But she was a ranger. No matter how fast she ran, she could only run. How could she be faster than a dragon that was flying in the sky and diving at high speed? Sasha's pretty face lost all color. Her delicate face was almost the same color as her silver hair. She forgot to breathe and forget to run. She had simulated over 100 scenarios in her mind, but none of them could let her escape. The dragon was too fast, and the range of its breath was too wide. If a dragon of this level breathed down, the area within a 50-meter radius would definitely turn into a fiery hell. Not even a blade of grass would grow. Sasha was in despair. Chapter 476. Sasha couldn't help but cry out in her heart. Am I going to die? Is this the fear of death? No. I don't want to die. There are still many places I haven't been to. There are still many sceneries I haven't seen. How can I die here like this? No. I don't want to die. Who? Who can save me? Big sister. Second sister. Fourth sister, Duque? Like a drowning person who was about to drown, Sasha's thoughts ran wild. This wasn't because Sasha was weak. It was because a ranger was a hunter, and had too many limitations. Forget about the hunter's signature skill, feigned death. The so-called feigned death was just pretending to be a corpse to fool the enemy into thinking that you were really dead, so they wouldn't attack you. The problem was that this giant dragon's destructive breath was indiscriminate. Without a way to defend against the fire element and space to dodge, she could only rely on her own resistance to take it. Could Sasha's petite body take it? For a ranger who focused on agility and dodging, when there was no way to dodge, it was time to die. It was no wonder that Sasha was in despair. In the last second, Duque did a series of actions that would dazzle anyone's eyes. A special arcane explosion blasted a rectangular hole in the ground that was big enough for Sasha to hide in. Mud flew everywhere, and at the same time, a stench unique to the mud of the swamp spread. Duque pressed down on Sasha's shoulders with lightning speed. With unimaginable strength and speed, he pushed the dazed Sasha into the hole. He even stuffed something into Sasha's hands. Almost at the same time, a giant ice pillar appeared out of nowhere, stabbing into the ground between the two of them and the giant dragon. After Sasha was pressed into the hole by Duque, she leaned against the ice bed that had appeared out of nowhere. Her sky blue and almond-shaped eyes were wide open as she looked at Duque in disbelief. That moment seemed to last for eternity. Sasha swore that as long as she lived, she would never forget this moment. Everything at the edge of her vision had been dyed golden red. The sky, the atmosphere, the rising dust, and the flying bits of grass, all were dyed with the same ruinous hue. She could clearly feel the unparalleled heat coming from the ground and the ice bed. She could almost see that in the next moment, he would turn into ashes right in front of her eyes. This handsome man who was almost as beautiful as her, the real lover of her elder sister, would die in front of her just like that, just to protect her. A very clear feeling of heartbreak filled all her emotional space. Seeing Duque's face that had suddenly become extremely handsome and pleasing to the eye, Sasha was completely stunned. Duque gave her a reassuring look, then opened his right palm, stretched out his 5 fingers, and activated the ice barrier in front of her. A trapezoid of ice that appeared out of thin air enveloped Duque, separating him from Sasha. Fridge. A mage's absolute defense. Unless one's elemental energy was too much weaker than the enemy's, a mage would be invincible during this period of time. The weight of the ice pushed Sasha deeper into the ground, flattening and compacting every inch of space around Sasha. As Sasha had already been pressed into this rectangular pit, she wasn't directly pressed by the ice. Instead, because of this, Sasha became even safer. An incomparably high temperature descended. First, it was her head, then her entire body. The temperature from the soil became even higher. If it was said that she felt like she was being roasted on a fire earlier, then now she felt like she was being thrown into the mouth of an erupting volcano. It was a terrifying feeling that her skin was about to be roasted just by touching it. She felt like she was stuck to the edge of the pit. Am I going to die? Sasha couldn't help but scream in her heart. But through the transparent ice, she saw Duque's expression frozen in the layer of ice. It was a gentle, reassuring smile. If you knew that I'm still going to be roasted to death after all that you've done, would you still smile so gently? Sasha continued to scream in her heart. At this moment, Sasha suddenly realized that her right palm was glowing. She turned her head in shock, only to realize that it was a very rare epic-level trigger shield accessory. A gentle barrier of light with a chilly aura covered Sasha like an eggshell, perfectly blocking the high heat that was pressing in from all directions. Sasha finally calmed down. She murmured softly, "Did you predict this as well?" There was no longer any threat or fear. Sasha, who had finally relaxed, reached out her left hand and caressed it. She pressed it against Duque's right hand through the ice. Her face was also pressed against the ice, enjoying the special coldness. After the mage's ice barrier was activated, the mage was fixed inside like an ice sculpture. The mage inside seemed to have stopped everything, but in fact, his thoughts hadn't. His sight and senses were still working. If needed, the mage could also cancel the ice barrier in advance and regain his freedom. But Duque didn't do that. The ground suddenly shook violently. The earth was shaking, and the sand and stones were trembling. Because, the 1,000-year-old red dragon that had already made its final attack was like a plane crashing. It was shoveling the soft ground with incredible speed. Rumble, a loud sound exploded under Duque and Sasha's feet, spreading further and further. The dragon's huge body shoveled away a lot of soil and stones, and splashed up a lot of mud in the swamp. The sound of the dragon shoveling the ground continued for a few seconds, and then there was a short pause. Then, there was an intense rolling sound. After shoveling for a while, the dragon hit something like a boulder, and the shoveling turned into a rolling sound. How much time had passed? Sasha didn't know. She only knew that when everything calmed down, the cool piece of ice that was gently pressing down on her body disappeared. She didn't know why, but they clasped their fingers together across the ice. Between Sasha's two long legs, two warm human legs squeezed in. Luckily, at the last moment, Duzé's left hand pressed on the ice above Sasha's right shoulder, preventing his whole body from falling on top of her. Close. So close. They were so close that they could see every detail in each other's eyes, and feel each other's breath. Their faces instantly turned red. Time seemed to freeze again. Suddenly, Gavin Rad's untimely shout came from afar. "Boss! Are you okay?" Chapter 477. Gavin Rad was a qualified guard. Most of the time, he was a tactful fellow. He had seen too many affairs between nobles. In fact, he had done quite a few of them. It was just that after Stormwind City had fallen, he had put more effort into battle and military affairs. Just now, when the dragon had tried to plow the ground, even though Gavin Rad was invincible, he had been sent flying by the huge impact. He was not hurt, but he had been thrown into a shallow swamp. He was in heavy armor, and was in trouble. He could not run over, so he could only shout nervously. Who knew that Duque would have such romantic thoughts with his rumored sister-in-law in a situation like this? This rough man's words had messed up the atmosphere between Duque and Sasha. That was not enough. And then there was the next sentence. "Boss, are you dead yet? If you're not, make a sound." Humph. Duque did not make a sound. Instead, he used an arcane spell to write the word humph in the air. Gavin Rad, the single dog, was dumbfounded. Luo Ning was fine, but he was a little unlucky when he activated Ice Barrier. His whole body was sent flying by the dragon, and he landed in a swamp far away. After the Ice Barrier was deactivated, he fell into the mud like a tree. The swamp was not as deep as his calf. He would not drown, but he was in a sorry state. Ronan's face and red hair were covered in mud. To put it nicely, it looked like he had played with mud and wrestled. To put it bluntly, it felt like he had crawled out of a pit of shit. The only one who was not in a sorry state was Marion. Her blink was very far, and she had crossed dozens of meters. So, after she deactivated Ice Barrier, the first thing she did was to finish off the dragon. A 40-meter-long super arcane energy blade extended from Marion's slender hand, and it beheaded the dragon who was coughing up blood and struggling on the ground to finish off Duque and the others. Everything was silent. This. "Duque, can you get up first? You're so heavy." Not daring to look at Duque, Sasha, who was under him, tilted her face slightly. "Oh, I'm sorry." Her current posture was indeed unsightly. Even the thick-skinned Duque blushed. How should it be said, the three Windstalker sisters were too similar. For a moment, Duque almost thought that the person in front of him was his own Aurelia, and he wanted to press on and get intimate with her. Fortunately, the hair color of the three sisters was quite different. Especially Windsor's bright silver. That was close. That was close. He almost became a beast. Duque thought to himself that he was lucky. Then, he stood up in a gentlemanly manner, bent down, and extended his hand. Sasha was slightly stunned, but she still placed her soft and slender hand on Duque's palm. On the other side, Gavin Rad had just pulled the miserable Ronan out of the swamp. The swamp might not be deep, but the suction wasn't something an ordinary person could easily break free from. Then, the two burly men covered in mud saw Duque pull Sasha out of the pit gracefully. Duque even carefully patted off the snow on Sasha's shoulder armor. "Hey, can someone tell me why when I pull you up, what we're patting off is mud that smells like that thing? Why are they patting off snow?" Gavinrad muttered unhappily. That's right. The style was completely different. One side was very beautiful, and it was completely in line with all the elements that were praised by bards in night novels. The other side was very good, but the style was terrible. Ronan was completely unmoved. Instead, he held his head with both hands in distress. I only saw that I once again helplessly watched my teammate in danger of death. The one who risked his life to save his teammate was the great Duke Marcus, not me. Gavinrad was originally very angry at the troublemaker, Ronan. But after knowing that Ronan had caused the death of his teammate and the pain and self-blame that he couldn't hide, Gavinrad suddenly felt pity for the rough red-haired mage. Marion was very unhappy. She was clearly the main damage dealer. Why did the main character become Duque? No, that wasn't important. What was important was why Duque actually had something going on with his sister-in-law. That was what Marion was most unhappy about. Marion put her hands on her hips. Hey! Whatever you want to say, wait a bit. I insist that we move immediately. Based on the speed of those lizards, more will arrive in 10 minutes at most. How far could they go in 10 minutes? The horses of the 5 were all startled. Ronan's horse was swallowed in one bite, and the other horses were nowhere to be seen. The only one that could be seen was Gavinrad's horse. Perhaps the horses of paladins were especially easily inspired by the holy light and were especially courageous. Anyway, Gavinrad's heavy warhorses didn't run. They just stayed at the edge of the swamp and watched Gavinrad. However, when Gavinrad came out of the swamp and passionately hugged the horse's head, the horse seemed to have smelled Gavinrad's unpleasant odor. It actually snorted, turned around, and galloped 10 meters away before turning back to look at Gavinrad. It was clearly saying, "Don't touch me if you don't wash yourself clean." Oh my God. I'm so handsome, but my horse is actually looking down on me today. Gavinrad looked like he had nothing left to live for. Duke glanced at the cloudy sky in the distance, then looked at the system notification and said, "It's going to rain. We won't be able to walk far in 10 minutes. If we move recklessly, we'll be digging our own graves. Let's just stay here." Stay here? Marion's eyes widened in disbelief. Of course, we'll disguise ourselves. At this moment, Marion, Gavinrad, Sasha, and Ronan were all stunned. What kind of disguise could they do in 10 minutes? The 100-meter-long ground was still burning. The huge traces of the Crimson Dragon's crash could be seen from far away. Not to mention the eye-catching corpse of the Crimson Dragon that was as large as a small mountain. Marion was a little flustered. She subconsciously raised her head and tilted her chin. I'd like to know how a mere morning star like you can do something that even a radiant moon wizard like me can't do. Radiant moons and morning stars were essentially star wizards, and were in the category of perpetual motion machines. However, they could not hide the fact that the moon was closer to the ground than the stars. Simply put, a radiant moon's mana output was at least 100 times higher than a morning star wizard's. Sasha was about to say something, but Duque waved his hand to stop her. Duque didn't seem angry at all. In terms of strength, I obviously can't compare to you. However, in terms of some minor magic techniques, you can't compare to me. With that, Duque snapped his fingers, and everyone immediately discovered that the surrounding scenery had changed. Chapter 478. A huge canopy started to cover everyone's heads. It extended in a small curve from the top of their heads in all directions. The border was like a piece of paper that had been set on fire. A burning mark that kept moving downwards appeared in everyone's field of vision. When it felt very realistic, but still a little distorted, everyone came to a realization. No, it should be said that Gavinrad was the only one watching the show. Everyone, including Sasha, suddenly realized that the scene they saw from the canopy had become a little illusory and hazy. Illusion? But this big? An area of effect spell that spanned hundreds of meters left everyone speechless. The two mages and the ranger all used their own abilities to charge out of the area covered by the illusion. Gavin Rad saw this and immediately jumped onto his horse, running out to watch the show. When they charged out and looked back, everyone's mouths, which had already been slightly open from shock, immediately widened. What did they just see? The huge deep mark that the giant dragon had made when it fell was gone. What they saw was just an ordinary muddy road in the swamp. The dragon corpses that had been piled up like a small hill had now become a small hill. As if the heavens were helping Duque, rain started to fall from the sky. It seemed that the thick burnt smell and the unique fishy smell of dragon blood would be diluted in a while. Seeing this, Gavin Rad breathed a sigh of relief. But unexpectedly, the two pharaohs' expressions became even more nervous. Not good, Ronan cried out in shock. Only the spellcasters themselves knew the limitations of illusions. The bigger and more complicated the scene created by the illusion, the more it tested the spellcaster's skill. If it was said that when the rain poured down, there wouldn't be any water left in the area of the illusion. As long as the observer wasn't an idiot, they would definitely be seen through. Ronan cried out in shock. Marion also clenched her fists nervously. Once again, they couldn't believe their eyes. What was that? The rain poured down from the sky, and the dense and long lines of rain fell to the ground. It didn't have the unstable feeling of being in a trance like a low-level illusion. It did not have the rigid intermediate illusions, which did not care if it was raining or scattering sand. Everything inside the illusions would be absorbed without making a sound. They only saw that after the rain line fell into the field of illusion, it looked like the rain line was still falling naturally from the outside. When it fell to the ground, it created small splashes, and when it fell into the puddles of the swamp, it created small ripples. Furthermore, they weren't rigid and identical water ripples. They were ripples of different sizes that would affect each other. The four of them were dumbfounded. Still in disbelief, Gavin Rad stood at the boundary of the illusion with his hands on his hips, looking left and right. Impressively, it was verified that Duque had used illusions to simulate almost everything. Most of the things inside and outside were the same, except for the traces of fire and shoveling, as well as the huge dragon corpse. Right at this moment, an urgent dragon roar came from the horizon. It wasn't a threat, nor was it a demonstration. It was more like a message. Come in quickly. Duque waved his hand, and the four of them ran back into the field of illusion. Just in case, they found a small hill under the shade of a tree and hid as much as possible. Looking up, they saw several black dots rapidly enlarging on the horizon. In a few breaths, they could vaguely see these big red guys that had pushed away the dark clouds. Naturally, they were the dragon riders of the Dragon Maw tribe. They rode on their giant dragons and circled above Duque's head for several kilometers. They seemed to be shouting something, but they were too far away to hear clearly. Sasha's long elven ears twitched. Relying on the strength given to her by the wind, she whispered everything she heard. Sasha was actually a language genius. She didn't understand the dragon language, nor did she understand the orc language, but she could perfectly repeat the dragon's whispers and the orc's shouts. Duque knew the orc language, and after translating it, it was, "Didn't that guy Orlando's dragon shout that there's a strong enemy here? Why can't I see anyone or the dragon? Don't tell me he ran away," another orc rider replied. Probably. There are no signs of battle around. Once the big guys we're riding start fighting, they can be seen from miles away. That was how the orcs discussed. Marion's translation of the dragon language was a different version. "Be careful, Graal's signal is that he can't handle it. Graz is already the strongest of the third generation of dragons. He might have already been killed. Is there really such a terrifying enemy? Don't underestimate the humans and high elves. Even though most of them are weak, the strongest among them has the ability to threaten Her Majesty's life." The giant dragon circled a few times in the sky, but it didn't find anything. Most of the red dragons flew away first. Under the orc's orders, it reluctantly lowered its altitude and flew over the nearby swamp at a height of about 100 meters. Most dragons didn't care about things that weren't their interests. Obviously, this female red dragon wasn't one of them. On the ground, a hill attracted her attention. Even though she was being controlled, she still tried to use all sorts of things to distract her attention and anger, such as admiring the beautiful mountains and rivers. Unknowingly, she clearly remembered the terrain of the entire wetland. She was absolutely sure that there wasn't a hill here 2 days ago. She began to get closer. A dragon's nose was more sensitive than most dogs. She didn't feel it when she was soaring high in the sky, but when she arrived, she smelled the faint scent of blood and burnt soil. However, as far as he could see, there was no sign of battle at all. An instinctive sense of danger made her secretly adjust her flight path and deviate from the predetermined course. If the other party really killed Grawl, who was known as the strongest of the third-generation dragons, in such a short time, then she would only be sending herself to her death if she bumped into him. This female dragon's cautiousness saved her life. That's right, she was originally flying straight towards the corpse of the already dead Grawl. She stealthily deviated and ended up brushing past the edge of Duque's illusory domain. Most red dragons preferred melee combat, but there were also geniuses like Krasis. This little female dragon noticed something was wrong the moment she brushed past the illusory domain. She turned her yellow eyes slightly and saw through the illusory domain. She was shocked to see Graal's corpse and a human mage smiling at her under the shade of a tree. No, there wasn't just one mage. She saw at least 3 mages, a paladin and a ranger. Chapter 479. In that instant, the little female dragon had 2 choices. One was to become the beastman's loyal dog and point out the location of Duque and the others. She could imagine that she would definitely be attacked by Duque and the others. The most likely outcome was that she would die. This was also a matter of status. If Duque and the others panicked, or if Duque opened a portal early to escape, the little female dragon would not be so afraid. However, the best fighter among her peers was already lying on the ground. Blood was still flowing from his severed neck. It was not a scene of blood splattering dozens of feet, but it was still frightening enough. What kind of person was a mage who could easily kill a 1,000-year-old dragon? The little female dragon did not dare to imagine. Looking at Duke's strange face and the confident smile on Duke's face, Luo Ruashi felt a chill run down her spine. The little female dragon naturally took it as a warning, don't talk too much. Otherwise, you will end up like him. So, the little female dragon did not hesitate to choose the second option. Pretending to be deaf and mute. After all, if the queen was rescued, she might still have to mix with the humans and elves in the future. The Tearsful Council had worked together with the 4 major dragon races for thousands of years. The little female dragon whispered in dragon language, I didn't see anything. The little female dragon was not sure if he had heard her. Unexpectedly, in the next second, the young human used arcane energy to produce a line of words. It was standard dragon language, and on it was the name of the leader of the Red Dragon Army, Alexstrasza. The little female dragon said, understood. Hey! Mount, what are you shouting for? The beast man on the dragon's back asked rudely. Nothing, my throat is itchy, the little female dragon replied helplessly in her unpracticed beast man language. To the people below, flying at high speed was just a matter of a flash. If dragons could sweat, the little female dragon would definitely be drenched as if she had just been fished out of water. The dragon's shadow disappeared into the distance. The group of 5 finally sighed in relief. The danger had passed. How to clean up the mess was now on the agenda. Ronan rubbed the back of his head, as if he had been holding back a breath and suddenly exploded, everyone, sorry, I messed up again. Who said you messed up? Duque said with a straight face, I thought you had a bright future and could attract enemies, so I taught you how to use your magic talent. I'm the one who should feel sorry for letting you become bait without knowing it. Huh? Is this true? Luo Ning froze. If he hadn't made a move against the first few beast men, then Gavin Rat alone would have been enough to slaughter them all. Duque pursed his lips and turned to Marion. Did you hear that dragon's dragon language? She didn't know why Duque wanted to protect Ronan's pride, but since Duque was the boss of the team, Marion was happy to do him a favor. Congratulations, Duque. You've successfully connected with the Red Dragon Army. After saying that, Marion translated a little of the little female dragon's dragon language. The other three once again opened their mouths wide in shock. Is that even possible? Red dragons that like to fight are few and far between, after all. Killing this guy will be getting rid of a scourge. In terms of results, our fight was perfect. No one was hurt, and they were on the line. Also, Duque chanted a short incantation, and a giant portal opened up. In front of the four of them, a semi-ethereal specter mage walked out of the blue oval portal with a giant magic puppet. Master, what are your orders? Karthika asked. He was supposed to be an influential figure in this world, but because of a ridiculous twist of fate, he died before he could even make a name for himself. Duque pointed at the giant dragon corpse. Same old rules. Karthika's mouth twitched. Master Duque, I must remind you that the Red Dragon Army is fundamentally kind. Duque said righteously, right now, our factions are at war, and we're on our way to save Alexstrasza. If the Red Dragon Queen is that petty, I'll make sure she doesn't have a good time. Alright, you're the master. Whatever you say. Karthika waved his hand, and more arcane puppets ran out of the portal. Under his command, they skillfully dissected the dragon corpse. The third-generation Red Dragon Grizzla, who had a bright future ahead of him and had a high chance of becoming an ancient dragon, was dissected and transported away in front of everyone. The entire process took less than 20 minutes. It was clear that Karthika's skinning was at the master level. Now I believe that you've killed more than 300 red dragons in Alterac, Marion said, giggling. Although many military reports were accompanied by magical images, the arrogant elves always felt that the humans were lying about the military reports and exaggerating their achievements. Otherwise, why would 50,000 beast men be able to beat the high elves like dogs, while the 20 to 30,000 humans were able to kill the beast men? Didn't this mean that the high elves were inferior to the humans? The elves couldn't accept this truth from the bottom of their hearts. Karthika shrugged. I didn't want to. After dissecting a few hundred red dragons, I can dissect one with my eyes closed. What was Duque doing at this moment? He sighed and laughed inwardly. Of the two archmages in Azeroth, Karthika was a tragedy. Unless he joined the Lich King in the future, he would be like this for the rest of his life. Luo Ning. Who knew if Luo Ning would be able to rise to the level he had in history in this life? However, this wasn't something that Duque had to worry about. After the dozens of arcane puppets, which had been created using the Karazhan Curator as a blueprint, cleaned up the scene, Karthika retreated with his subordinates. Alright, what do we do now? Gavin Rad looked at the supplies that had been brought back from Karazhan and was worried that there weren't enough horses to transport them. This was because the food stored in a mage's storage bag would sometimes go bad. Duque suddenly laughed. He flipped his hand and pointed behind him with his thumb. Why don't we ask our friends over there? No one knew what Duque was doing. In grim battle, Queen Alexstrasza, who had transformed into her human form and had been lying on the cold floor, twitching in pain, suddenly opened her eyes. The main reason why the Red Dragon Army was willing to be enslaved by the beast men was because the entire race was connected on a spiritual level. The Queen's will was absolute. Similarly, the lower red dragons also acted as the support for the Queen's power. On this day, Alexstrasza once again felt the loss of the Red Dragon Army. For the young dragons that only had animal instincts and the intelligence of a 5- or 6-year-old human child, a loss was a loss. Strictly speaking, as long as they didn't have complete self-awareness, they couldn't be considered a part of the Red Dragon Army. Chapter 480. It was different this time. Among the third-generation red dragons, Griffin was one of the more valued ones. Although he was violent and had a serious tendency to destroy, as a combat dragon, all these could only be regarded as advantages. Griffin was killed almost instantly. The Red Dragon Queen did not sense the specific situation, but she instinctively believed that it must be a strong one. But the image of the soul sent by a little female dragon later made Alexstrasza not know whether to laugh or cry. Duke Marcus. The moment she saw the image, Alexstrasza recognized Duque. To be honest, Alexstrasza had never taken the strong human seriously. There were only a few humans who could really catch her eye. Back then, even when it came to breaking dawn mages and monarchs like Anastrian and Antonidas, this queen only said, "Oh," and did not continue. Even in the long tens of thousands of years, there were not many great people who could be remembered by her. The only one she remembered was Duque, and it was Duque, who was only an earth mage at that time. There was no other reason than that the siege of Karazhan had left a deep impression on her. The magic barrage that was like a torrential rain, the magic baptism that seemed to be able to cause the entire Red Dragon army to suffer heavy casualties, was actually forcibly turned into unprecedented fireworks by that little Duque. Alexstrasza felt as if her entire race had been toyed with by Duke. She couldn't even hit the target with a small spell that didn't even count as an itch, but would always hit the target. Later on, she had to secretly be grateful to this cunning young man, and almost gave him a certificate of merit. Now, he was here again. As a possible savior. Speaking of which, being controlled this time was the dragons shooting themselves in the foot. Because of Nisario's betrayal, the dragons suffered heavy casualties, and even caused the blue dragons to almost go extinct. In the end, the corrupted soul of the dragon was taken back, and the dragons cast a spell on this divine artifact that had become the soul of the demon, making it impossible for any dragon to use this divine artifact. But the arrogant dragons forgot about the other races, which led to today's humiliation. If it was in the past, she wouldn't have cared if the Alliance sent a kid to save her. Unfortunately, after being controlled by the devil's soul, and enslaved by the orcs, the dignity of the dragons had been trampled on. Being chained up, being wantonly beaten, and being subjected to pain on the soul level. Moreover, the orc warlock Necros was already using her as a bargaining chip to force the second-generation dragons to mate and produce more young dragons for the tribe. If Alexstrasza hadn't discovered that as long as she maintained her human form, the orcs wouldn't force her to mate with other dragons, the outcome might have been even worse. In fact, Alexstrasza couldn't hold on much longer. She could feel herself weakening on a spiritual level. If she completely succumbed or weakened, then she would not be able to maintain the protective magic on her dragon egg to protect her child that might be born. The Azeroth dragon was a little strange. The eggs of the female dragon were not the real offspring. Just like a human female's egg, not every egg would become a child, but an egg would be released every month. The red dragon was similar. Female dragons would ovulate at relatively regular intervals, dragon eggs. However, these dragon eggs could only hatch and become real dragons after the male dragon imbued them with a special spiritual inheritance and power. Of course, female dragons could also use their power to catalyze the eggs to hatch young dragons, but these young dragons were usually just trash. The power of the parents determined the upper limit of the offspring's power. If a dragon wanted to give birth to a strong offspring, it was best to find a dragon of a similar level as a partner. Alexstrasza knew very well that countless ambitious people were eyeing her precious dragon eggs. The Red Dragon Queen couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "Duque. Come and save me. If you can save me before my babies are destroyed, then I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life. Otherwise. If it's too late, don't blame me for taking it out on you. It seems like I can't beg a little human to be so perfect." I'm so conflicted. On the one hand, she had to place her hopes on Duque and hope that he would come quickly. On the other hand, she felt that it was too much to place her hopes on a human who wasn't very powerful. Alexstrasza, who was deep in the whirlpool of despair, was actually a little confused at this moment. Duque could not guess the thoughts of the once high and mighty Red Dragon Queen. At this moment, Duque had met an unexpected ally. In the original time and space, when the Alliance mobilized to save the Red Dragon Queen, the main force of the Horde had already been defeated, leaving only the scattered tribes and clans resisting stubbornly. Therefore, in the entire wetland area, besides the Orc Dragon Riders of the Dragon Maw clan, there were also a large number of Alliance armed forces, the Griffin Knights of the Wildhammer Dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain, the Bronzebeard Dwarves from the Iron Furnace Castle, and the Silver Hand from Lordaeron. At this point in time, this was the standard definition of the enemy's rear. Duque didn't expect anyone to come here to help him, but who knew that he would meet an important person, Prince Muradin Bronzebeard. He was said to be a prince because the father of the 3 Bronzebeard brothers had died, and now Magni Bronzebeard was the king. As Magni's second brother, Muradin was naturally promoted to a prince. After the little female dragon ran away, seeing Muradin and a group of dwarven warriors emerge from the ground, Duque was dumbfounded. "Why are you here?" "Nonsense. You, the deputy commander of the Alliance, can come, why can't I, the Cosmodan dwarf, be here?" Yes, dwarves were always so simple and direct. In the eyes of humans, this was almost too rough. Duque couldn't help but smile. That's right. Strictly speaking, this was still dwarven territory, just that it was occupied by the Horde. Ha, I was wrong. I'm so happy to see you, my friend. Duque bent down happily and opened his arms. Duque immediately knew that he was too happy. "Welcome, Bronzebeard dwarf, my eternal friend." Muradin, who was carrying at least 60 kilograms of armor, almost pounced on Duque and gave him a bear hug. Ka-la-la, Duque could clearly hear the crisp sound of his bones. Just a little more, and Duque felt that he would have broken many bones all over his body. Muradin immediately realized that he had gone too far, and immediately let go of Duque. "Damn it, you human mages just have weak bodies. Woo-woo. I'm asking for it. It's my fault. I'm just a university animal, and I transmigrated to this body. You're blaming me? I'm already training. I'm training, alright." Chapter 481. Duque lamented in his heart as he complained, "Not every man is called Arnold Schwarzenegger." Alas, Azeroth was still a world with backward medical care and harsh natural environments. Babies who weren't particularly strong couldn't survive to adulthood at all. In a sense, the average physique of modern people was actually far inferior to that of medieval European adults. That was a long story. Ahem. Duque coughed a few times before he could catch his breath. Muradin glanced around. "Come on, let's get back to our base." The dwarves really had burrowed out of the ground. No one would have thought that under the wet, muddy swamp, the dwarves had opened countless tunnels. They weren't simply reinforced with wooden planks, but tunnels with standard beams and pillars, as well as stone roofs. Looking at the tunnel, which was rather low by human standards and was wet from time to time, Muradin immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, my friends, we didn't mean to mistreat you. After all, this is built to dwarven standards. The most majestic dwarf wouldn't be taller than 1.6 meters. So the dwarves already found the tunnels at a height of 1.8 meters to be very comfortable. This was hard on the big guy, Gavin Rad, who had to crouch all the way along. Walking in the tunnels, everyone got over it. Only Marion used her magic, a little disgusted. She covered the entire ceiling, walls, and ground with frost elements to make sure that the places she walked were relatively clean. Muradin frowned but didn't say anything. As they walked and talked, Duque finally learned why Muradin was here. At the beginning of the alliance, Muradin had stayed in Lordaeron as the highest representative of the bronze-bearded dwarves in the alliance. He also tried his best to get support for his country. Muradin soon discovered that, in fact, it was enough for him to deal with Duque. Because as long as his request wasn't too outrageous, Duque would get it for the bronze-bearded dwarves even if he had to go to other human kingdoms to extort, and use his own fleet to deliver it directly to the meeting point on the northern coast of Iron Stove Castle. medicine, food, even iron ore. Duque did the best that an ally could do. Over time, Muradin and Duque became very good friends. Recently, the alliance had begun to switch from defense to offense. Muradin could no longer sit still and handed over the work to his deputy. He immediately rushed back to the iron furnace fort. In a situation where Magni was unable to allocate more manpower to him, the second son of the Bronzebeard family relied on his dozen or so good friends to attack the mines controlled by the orcs and rescue many of his compatriots from within. Then, relying on these rescued compatriots, they organized a resistance army in the wetlands and attacked the orcs everywhere. Duque couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. I was wondering why the sky was filled with flying dragons, but it turns out they're actually searching for you. Duque felt like he had been implicated. Muradin did not show any weakness. Isn't it to prepare in advance? When you attack Solder Bridge, we can support you from the south. Duque smiled bitterly. After walking for more than half an hour, they finally arrived at the base of Muradin's rebel army, the Verga excavation site in the southern part of the wetlands. Unlike the excavation site in the future, which was filled with all sorts of things, this was now just the dwarves' excavation site. The innumerable pits and complicated terrain gave the orcs a headache. To the orcs, the dwarves here were even more troublesome than groundhogs that loved to dig holes. The orcs had temporarily abandoned this place. In a sense, this was a liberated area for the dwarves. In the huge cave, the dwarves here noticed the guests Muradin had brought, as well as Sasha and Marion in the group. A dwarf's eyes lit up. Beautiful elven ladies. And two of you. The dwarf ran over and bowed clumsily. Falstead the dragon catcher is at your service, elven ladies. Note that this fellow only bowed to Sasha. Only then did Duque realize that before him, the high elves of Kuel Salis were the dwarves' only truly trusted allies. Of course, this did not completely explain why Falstead's attention was focused on Sasha. It wasn't just him, most of the dwarves' gazes were focused on her. Evidently, they found her very charming. Ugh, did you forget someone? At the side, Marion had her hands on her hips, the word annoyed written all over her face. Duque hurriedly tried to smooth things over. All right. For the sake of your liberation, let's get down to business. The group of five ignored this little interlude, and went to an even more secluded cave within the large cave. It was very narrow when they entered, and there was a huge sluice gate. According to Muradin, it could even block out dragon breath. When they arrived at Muradin's command center and saw the flags representing the orcs on the sand table, Duque immediately realized that things were more troublesome than he had imagined. He saw many small flags near the Grimbader fortress that was now under the control of the orcs. Muradin introduced them to Duque one by one. Those damned green-skinned creatures knew this day would come. Ever since Orgrim and the Horde suffered a tragic defeat at the gates of Lordaeron, the Horde's forces began to gather here. Look, these are all second-rate clans of the Horde. Each clan has about 10,000 to 30,000 people, and most of them are adult orcs. This is a steel tooth, that's a digging tooth, and that's a broken axe. Duque narrowed his eyes. Without the Red Dragon army, the victorious Alliance army would not take long to reach the Cosmodan region. Yes, the Alliance of Lordaeron might have to go all out to reach here, but Duque had no doubt that the Alliance could do it. Duque could almost imagine the scene of the Alliance army gathering north of Solder Bridge. However, as long as Orgrim was still the chief of the Horde, he could imagine that the Alliance wanted to further weaken the orcs before the army attacked. The simplest way was to kill the Red Dragon Queen, or rescue her. Also, the clumsy Lordaeron elite bandits had already sounded the alarm for the orcs. This situation was at least 10 times harsher than the rescue mission in history. Now, more than 100,000 orcs had surrounded Grim Battle. Even if the combat power of these second-rate clans was at most half of the orc warriors of the Blackstone and Warsong clans, and not much stronger than ordinary human soldiers, they were still not 100,000 pigs. Duque, you said you want to save the Red Dragon Queen. Are you confident? If you are, I have 1,000 elites here to carry out a feint attack for you. The heroic Muradin was definitely a friend. One look and you could tell that he was the kind of good brother who was willing to go through mountains of knives and seas of fire for his brothers. Chapter 482. In history, Muradin and his younger brother, Buf Lang Bronzebeard, founded an organization known as the Association of Explorers. Later, one of Muradin's adventures took him to the icy hell of Northrend in the north. There, he began to search for a cursed sword called Frostmourne. However, he was surrounded by a large number of undead troops and forced to retreat. Under the fierce attack of the undead troops, he found himself rescued by his old friend, Arthes. In this way, Muradin followed Arthes step by step into a dead end. Even when he saw Arthes disobey his father's orders and burn the departing ships, even when he saw Arthes recruit local mercenaries to fight for him, and then kill them treacherously, Muradin still did not abandon him. It was not until he defeated the guards and found Frostmourne that Muradin read the inscription on the tablet, told him that it was a cursed sword, and immediately prepared to leave. However, Arthes did not care. He walked to the pedestal and took out the sword. The sword burst out of its ice prison, and the flying fragments pierced through Muradin like spears. Muradin did not die, but this became an eternal pain in Muradin's heart. Duque sighed quietly in his heart. He did not want these dwarves to die. Moreover, the most critical piece of the puzzle in the plan was still missing. Muradin was keen on the war with the orcs, but unfortunately, with the intervention of the dragons, the war between the Alliance and the orcs became a very insignificant matter. Compared to the Wing of Death, Cosmodan's more than 100,000 orcs were nothing. Duque muttered in his heart, "Nesario, where the hell are you?" At the same moment as Duque muttered, Duque suddenly felt two gazes. These two gazes gave Duque a very strange feeling. It was clearly an ordinary gaze, but it suddenly changed. Duque turned his head, but he could not see a single stranger. In the command center, other than his team of 5, there was only Muradin and Falstead, who had just run over to Sasha to please her. This guy was the captain of the Griffin squadron that Cudrin Wildhammer had sent to his cousin Magni. Because there was no need to use the Griffins in the defense of Iron Furnace Castle, he ended up following Muradin. For a moment, Duque almost suspected that his feeling was wrong. But who was Duque? He was one of the best transmigrators after transmigrating to the hell-level world of Azeroth. Duque, who claimed to be an old driver from hell. Duque had always believed in his intuition because he firmly believed that the so-called intuition of danger was just the brain's judgment of dangerous situations. Perhaps he couldn't react rationally, but his brain had already determined that this was a dangerous situation, and he instinctively informed Duque. There must be a reason behind this abnormality. Duque had a plan. Falstead, are you familiar with the Orc Dragon Cavalry's patrol route? Falstead was happy to show off his strength in front of Sasha. If it was still those brainless green-skinned creatures commanding the red dragons blindly, I might still be worried. Because you can never talk to a fool about the rules. When he said this, the entire command center burst into laughter. The orc commander might be more intelligent, but most of the orcs under him were pure boorish men. Dealing with such a person was a headache for both the enemy and friend. Falstead's voice rose an octave, but I found that those stupid green-skinned creatures were fooled by the red dragons. Not every red dragon is willing to work for the green-skinned creatures. Those red dragons purposely formed a patrolling airspace that looked strict, but was actually full of flaws. As long as you are willing to trust me, I can use the griffins to fly you all the way to the foot of grim battle in the dark. This was the benefit of having a local guide. If Cudrin led the army directly in, it would most likely turn into a large-scale aerial battle. The Wildhammer dwarves were not afraid of death, but Duque did not dare to be so wasteful. Duque whistled, "Not bad. If we can avoid the orc camp, then when we reach the foot of the mountain, I can bring my team all the way to grim battle with illusions." Recalling how Duque used a wide-area illusion to trick the red dragons in the sky, Muradin muttered, "Magic is so convenient. I was thinking that to save the Red Dragon Queen, we would need at least a squad of elite knights and rangers." Duque patted Muradin's shoulder and turned to his team. All right, let's vote. Do you trust our Wildhammer brothers? It doesn't matter. Gavin Rad shrugged. I will follow your orders, sir. Ronan lowered his head. Marion frowned, but Sasha said directly, what if we happen to run into a dragon cavalry patrol? Falstead patted his chest proudly. If there are less than 4 red dragons, we, the Wildhammer Knights, will tell those big lizards that this is the dwarves' territory. A Griffin Knight squadron had about 15 to 20 Griffin Knights. In fact, this was not a weak force. Seeing Sasha's frown, Falstead comforted her, don't worry. If there really is a mishap, we will send you and Mr. Paladin to the ground first. Falstead elegantly ignored the 3 mages. That's right, mages who could not fall to their deaths with slow fall were all F***King hooligans. In the summer, moonless nights were not easy to find. Duque and his team stayed in Muradin's nest for 3 days before the desired weather arrived. Feeling uneasy, Sasha followed Falstead onto the griffin. The griffin she was riding on screeched at its companion next door, as if it was mocking them. There were 2 people in the same carriage, but on his side, there was a nimble elf girl, and on the other side, there was a burly, fully armored holy knight. The face of the neighboring griffin had obviously darkened. The dwarf knight had to eat a large piece of raw meat before taking off before the griffin brother flapped its wings and took off. Obviously, either Falstead's patrol route was wrong, or they had run out of luck. Even though the moon was dim, 2 new spots in the distance caught the griffin team's attention. These 2 spots in the sky kept moving, growing larger and larger as they charged towards them. What are those? Flying at high speed in the wind, Falstead leaned forward and turned to look at Sasha behind him. He knew that this elven ranger had better night vision than him. Sasha's mouth was bitter, in the name of the sun well. Those are 2 dragons. At this moment, she hated the bragging dwarf griffin knight in front of her. What happened to sneaking into the village and not wanting to shoot? Dragons, and there were 2 of them at once. Are they red? Falstead pressed, unwilling to give up. Does that matter? Dragons are dragons. Will there be dragons of other colors on this battlefield? They're charging at us at high speed. Sasha shouted. Chapter 483. As the elven rangers with the best eyesight, Sasha and Falstead's griffins were also flying at the front. Less than 20 meters behind Sasha, Duque glanced at the other griffin riders and saw that the other dwarves had also noticed the 2 dragons. Without even needing the horn, the dwarven riders immediately adjusted their formation and spread out. On the left and right, 2 teams of 6 griffins quickly moved forward, overtaking the other griffins in the center. The dwarves followed the established strategy and began to protect important guests like Duque. In the distance, the 2 dragons also moved in a strategic manner. For some reason, the movements of these 2 dragons reminded Duque of the 2-plane formations commonly used in modern aerial battles. The larger one flew to a higher position and then flew away from its companion. Duque immediately realized what this giant beast wanted to do. Even if he didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that griffins and dragons had a limit. Griffins could still use tactics to counteract the red dragon's racial advantage against a young red dragon. Once the red dragon rose to the level of a young dragon, apart from Kudran's Griffin King, no griffins could keep up with the young dragon's movements. It was just like how the griffin was a propeller biplane from World War I. If it was up against a more advanced propeller monoplane, it might be able to put up a fight, but against a 5th-generation jet plane, it was just a joke. The dragon didn't climb because it was afraid of the griffins. On the contrary, it was because the dragon was too fast. If it rushed at it, it might miss. But if the dragon occupied the sky, it would be a completely different story. Diving down from the sky, the slower party wouldn't be able to avoid a high-speed dive no matter what they did. The dragon used the sky as a jar, put the griffins and the passengers in the middle, and then caught them like turtles in a jar. These 2 are experienced riders. Falstead shouted excitedly. The one who climbs is especially good. This will be a glorious battle. Glorious my ass. Didn't they say to put down the passengers first? At this moment, Sasha felt like strangling Falstad to death. Damn dwarf knights. Once their blood boiled, they couldn't care about anything else. According to human legends, dwarves were born from rocks. Of course, this legend had no basis, but it could also describe the stubbornness of the dwarves. Once he made up his mind, he would not change his mind no matter what. There were less than 20 breaths before they would enter battle mode. Sasha was so anxious that she was cursing out loud. Apart from Lilith, that expressionless and cold ghost, the other 3 Windrunner sisters all had very pleasant voices. Even though Sasha was scolding people now, it still felt like an oriole was singing. Falstad ignored all of them and actually carried the guests to charge forward. At that moment, Falstad suddenly heard the sound of his own horn from 20 meters away. Woo! 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 One short, one long, one short. Huh! Wasn't that their squadron leader's signal to retreat? Woo! 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 3 long. This was an order for everyone to retreat together and prioritize protecting the important goods. The strong wind brought about by the high-speed flight made people's shouts almost inaudible. Only the sound of the horn was slightly clearer. The night also made it difficult for the other Griffin Knights to see Falstad's movements clearly. The Dwarven Knights were highly disciplined, so they chose to follow orders unconditionally. Falstad blew his beard and glared. Only then did he realize that Sasha had touched his horn and given the command without permission. Furthermore, the sound of the horn was right. Hee. Sasha raised the horn with one hand proudly. Luckily, Duque gave me a brocade pouch before we set off. He told me to open it when you didn't listen to orders. Send an order from the Alliance's deputy commander, Duke Marcus. He orders you, Falstad Dragoncatcher, to immediately descend the Griffin. Otherwise, he will have Sir Cudron Wildhammer forbid you from ever flying again. Falstad was not afraid of anything. He was only afraid that he would not be allowed to fly again. The Wildhammer Knights who soared in the sky were not afraid of dying in the sky, but dying helplessly on their sickbeds. This time, Duque had really caught him at his Achilles' heel. Falstad knew that the situation was not good, but he could only give up on fighting the dragon. Damn it! If the dragon charges down like this, half of us will die. When that happens, you, the deputy commander, will have to take full responsibility. I don't care. Carry out the order. Sasha also understood that if she chose to retreat in this situation, it would only give the dragon a chance to take them down one by one. But some things were just like that. After going through the test of life and death, Sasha had an unprecedented feeling in her heart. That was unconditional trust in Duque. The fear of wandering in front of the gates to purgatory, the joy of narrowly escaping death, and the feeling of peace and warmth had long been deeply imprinted in the depths of Sasha's soul. She believed that she would never forget this complicated feeling for the rest of her life. I don't care if others believe it or not, I do. In the end, the Dwarven Griffin Squadron, which never backed down, actually ran away. This was out of the dragon's expectations, and also made the 2 red dragons extremely happy. Because after giving up on speed, these griffins were no different from helpless chicks in the eyes of humans. Suddenly breaking through the dense clouds, the ruler of the sky, the dragon, with unparalleled dominance, proudly descended from the sky. Close. Even closer. In less than 30 breaths, they would be able to tear these annoying birds with little claws into pieces and scatter them in the air. Very suddenly, the 2 dragons felt that they were seeing things for a moment. Huh? Why are there so many griffins? Immediately, the dragons realized that it wasn't an illusion. The griffins swayed a few times, and instantly, a large group of griffins appeared. Not just a dozen, but more than 100. Not just the dragons, but even the griffins themselves were shocked by the additional companions, and let out sharp cries. The knights had a slight headache, but they comforted their mounts. The dragons were dumbfounded. The younger dragon attacked first. It dove down, and with lightning speed, used its sharp claws to grab a griffin. Unexpectedly, not only did the griffin not feel any flesh being cut, it exploded instead. Bam! The explosion didn't cause any damage, but it scared the dragon. Yes, this was a classic case of the other party not wanting to talk to you, so he threw a self-destructing griffin at you. Unexpectedly, after one was blown up, more griffins flew out from the front. The older, more experienced, and more powerful dragon realized that this was a so-called illusion. It tried to determine whether the griffins were real from the sound they made when they flew. It failed. It was shocked to find that the 100 griffins actually made the sound of the wind breaking. The airwaves caused by high-speed flying could not be faked. Chapter 484. The giant dragon's eyes widened, filled with disbelief. Why did he have to make it look so real? The giant dragon felt like it had wasted its thousands of years of life. The giant dragon was dumbfounded. Falstead and Sasha were shocked as well. Sasha turned her head to look at Duque, only to see Duque smiling as he raised a finger. Two energies revolved around it obediently, wind and lightning. Sasha suddenly realized something. If Duque hadn't made a move, she would have forgotten that the Windrunner sisters weren't the only ones who had received the Storm Alter's power. From the start, Duque had gained the most benefits. However, Duque was in a high position, and he wasn't the kind of valiant general who led the charge, so he didn't have many opportunities to fool around. True mirror image gave Duque perfect visual deception. Power of Storm made Duque's counterfeiting skills even better. And the powerful Greatest King system gave Duque unparalleled control, making every illusion come to life. It could be said that other than those powerful beings who specialized in magic, no one could tell which of the griffins Duque had created was real and which was fake. Not just the giant dragon, even Duque's own people worshipped Duque in their hearts. The beautiful eyes of the two elven ladies in the team flickered as they watched. A huge disadvantage was actually forcefully evened out by Duque. After all, they were in the sky. No matter how wide the dragon's breath was, it couldn't cover such a large area in one breath. Just when everyone thought that Duque was shameless and the giant dragon couldn't do anything about it, the giant dragon made another move. The dazzling sparks lit up a large part of the sky. Every griffin knight suddenly turned around and saw hundreds of fireballs condensed in the air around the giant dragon's body. Even though it was flying at high speed, these strange fireballs didn't go out and danced around the giant dragon. Magic! A giant dragon that could use magic! The expressions on the faces of the dwarves were very ugly. It was already very difficult to be forced to fight against opponents that were many levels higher than oneself. This dragon could actually cast spells while flying at high speed. Judging from the appearance of those fireballs, they weren't ordinary goods. They were high-end goods created by draconic magic. Dragons were truly a race blessed by the heavens. Not only did they have a magic genius like Krasis, but they also had many freaks who practiced magic and martial arts at the same time. Under the illumination of the fire, the huge dragon's half-opened mouth reflected a dazzling, fierce light. Amidst the ferocious laughter, over 100 fireballs rained down on the group of griffins at a speed even faster than the giant dragon's flight. I don't care if you're real or fake. As long as he was hit by that, he would be done for. When everyone looked at Duque again, Duque's pupils suddenly shrank. Good timing. In terms of the destructive power of magic, Duque admitted that he was no match for Marion. In terms of movement casting ability and control, Marion, a radiant moon, couldn't catch up to Duque, who had the assistance of the system. In Duque's retinas, countless thin lines extended from the fireballs, telling Duque the trajectory of each fireball and the possible changes in direction due to the gale. In midair, countless hands of magic suddenly appeared. Almost at the same time, a large number of fireballs shot out to meet the flaming meteor shower falling from the sky. Boom! 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 A series of explosions sounded high in the sky behind them. The dwarven knights were dumbfounded. In their field of vision, it was the grandest fireworks in the night. The giant dragons were almost mad with anger. Without the urging of the orc knights behind them, the two dragons continued to dive at high speed. They wanted to see how these griffins, who had already dropped very low in altitude, could escape their hunt. Duque had a headache. His illusion wasn't without a distance limit. The limit distance in his retinas had always been clearly marked, and in this movement-casting state, a radius of 300 meters was the limit. He had no intention of sacrificing these griffin knights, but now, he suddenly discovered another problem. After the griffins successfully dropped his 5-man squad, they would inevitably be hunted down as soon as the griffins left the range of 300 meters. Don't think so much. As long as you're safe, our mission is done. Brothers and sisters, let's fight these big lizards to our heart's content. Falstead raised the tempest hammer high. Sometimes, Duque couldn't help but complain that the Horde's cards were too damn good. The infantry was stronger than the Alliance, and so was the Air Force. If Dan hadn't rebelled, it wouldn't have been so easy for the Alliance to turn from defense to offense. Duque thought of a new plan. A slightly risky but permanent solution. He once again set his sights on Marion, who wasn't good at movement casting. At this moment, a crimson system alert suddenly popped up on Duque's retinas. Alert! Alert! Unknown super strong boss has entered the skies. Initial evaluation, undefeatable skeleton, immediate retreat is strongly recommended. Do you want to activate the boss battle module? Just as Duque raised his head in shock, a huge hole suddenly appeared in the thick clouds in the sky due to a violent storm. Moonlight shone down. Under the bright moonlight, a dark metallic figure that looked like a titan landed in the middle of the battle between the griffins and the giant red beast. What the hell is that? Falstead opened his mouth with difficulty, allowing the wild wind to pour into his throat. Even the radiant moon elven wizard who thought he had seen many things found himself trembling all over, unable to speak a single word. That young red dragon was already big enough, not the slightest bit inferior to the big red dragon that Duque and Marion had killed a few days ago. However, at this moment, a pair of black dragon wings that were almost 3 times the size of the red dragon filled everyone's field of vision. The dragon's wings flashed with a black metallic light, causing everyone to feel an indescribable sense of shock. A thunderous roar that seemed to even shake the night sky sounded out, the sound waves easily shattering all of Duque's illusions and pushing the griffins away. The sudden appearance of the black dragon almost caused the little red dragon to wet its pants due to the huge disparity in size. It had been so aggressive just a moment ago, but now it was no different from a pug that had seen a large beast. In the darkness, the black dragon's narrow eyes stared at the smaller red beast in front of it in disdain. The orc red dragon roared in a mournful voice, clearly aware that this fellow that had appeared was definitely not on its side. The 4 dragons were of the same breath and branches. The problem was that these 4 colors did not include black. I'm very sorry, but we might be finished, my elf lady. Falstead looked like he was about to write his will. Chapter 485. The black dragon spread its wings that seemed to be able to cover the entire night sky, and let out a low, mocking laugh from its huge mouth, waking up every tiny existence. Sasha looked up again. Her eyes widened as she saw a terrifying face. Beneath the pair of huge horns was a pair of narrow, gem-like eyes that shone with a ferocious light. 4 strong limbs that were filled with explosive power, sharp claws, and a bloody mouth that was spewing golden flames of death. Under the night sky, its crimson stripes gave it a terrifying appearance that was beyond imagination. It was like a legendary devil. But what attracted her attention the most was that everything he could see was metal. The metal that was plated and emitted a strange metallic luster under the faint moonlight almost covered the black dragon's entire body. As long as one reached the young dragon level, the natural dragon scales that dragons were born with had proven to be immune to most mortal weapons. Even ballistae could not penetrate the dragon's natural scales. Why did this dragon have to wear armor to protect itself? What kind of metal was this armor made of? There was no answer. Everyone was fine, but she had never seen metal like this. Sasha did not have the urge to shoot at it, but she instinctively felt that even if she did, it would be a waste of effort. This metal armor clearly conveyed a sense of trance. It had a strength that could not be penetrated by mortal power. And only a very powerful and self-centered dragon would endure the pain of having its body embedded in the alloy. Wings of Death, Sasha repeated the nightmarish name softly. Wings of Death, Neltharion. In the legends of the elves, there were a total of 5 great dragon aspects that represented mystery and the power of nature a long time ago. Some legends claimed that the red Alexstrasza symbolized the true meaning of life. The other dragon aspects knew very little about them. The elves had already felt their influence, and had even come into contact with them on different occasions. But the elven elders had never leaked more information about dragons. However, among the dragons, there was already one that the world was familiar with. It had told the world in its own way before the other dragons. Although it originally had its own name, it chose Deathwing as its title in order to better despise the weaker ones around it. Deathwing did his best to destroy the worlds built by elves, humans, and dwarves. Even the oldest elven elder didn't know why Deathwing did this. In private, the elves gave it another name, the Forgotten Dragon Aspect. It was a short sentence, but it contained many meanings: abandoned responsibility, chaos, betrayal, and anger. If Alexstrasza represented the true meaning of life, then Deathwing represented the power of destruction. However, such a giant dragon was soaring in front of them as if it was protecting them in its own way. Of course, there was another possibility. Deathwing did not seem to notice the existence of Sasha and the Griffin Knights at all. Only the red dragon in front of it could be called its opponent, because Deathwing hated its kind of other colors, to the point that if other dragons were to come into contact with it, they would be mercilessly torn apart. A moment ago, the 2 red dragons were still chasing prey that was smaller than them, like cats chasing mice. A moment later, the prey became themselves. Deathwing stirred up a huge gust of wind. Like a curtain of night covering the earth, he rushed past the Griffin Knights in an instant and attacked the other side. In just one move, the smaller dragon was torn in half by the huge right claw of the Wings of Death. In the eyes of mortals, the huge young red dragon was like a broken toy that had been thrown away. Flesh and scales flew everywhere, and it did not even cry out as it fell to the ground just like that. What terrifying lethality! The mortals below were dumbfounded. Unbelievable, Falstad mumbled, "We were actually saved by the legendary dragon of extreme evil, Deathwing." The sudden scream was like a slap to his face. He turned his head, and there was nothing in the direction of the scream. However, in the other corner of his vision, he saw the tragic state of his companion. Flames. Just the flames that escaped when the Wings of Death swept across the sky had already caused the death of a dwarf knight and the griffin beneath him. 10 meters away, Falstad watched helplessly as his companion was set ablaze by an evil flame in front of him. It was just a tiny spark, but after touching a human body, the fire suddenly grew many times stronger. From a single spark, it turned into a prairie fire. The high temperature that followed burned the dwarf and the griffin's fur in the fire. Their skin peeled off, revealing their burning muscles, bones, and organs. Then, their blood evaporated and turned to ash. For a moment, Falstad and Sasha were stunned in midair. Heavens, how many people had been hit? An elf and a dwarf started to panic at the same time. They twisted their necks and moved their eyes to search at their limits. Seeing Marion cry out in alarm, Sasha jumped down herself. As a mage with the godly skill, Slow Fall, Marion's jump was more daunting than dangerous. She saw Gavin Rad. The griffin that the Holy Knight was riding on was probably done for, but the Holy Light saved his life again. He seemed to have activated Holy Shield, and after withstanding the flames for a moment, another skilled dwarf knight caught up with the fallen Gavin Rad and saved him. Ronan's griffin was blown away by the wind. It could be seen that the dwarf knight was doing his best to help the griffin regain its balance. Even though it was a mess, it was not in any danger. Duque. Where's Duque? Suddenly, Sasha's heart was seized by fear. The dragon roar in the sky attracted everyone's attention again. Deathwing and the red dragon roared at each other, the deafening roar getting louder and louder. A few seconds later, the two dragons collided in midair. In that moment, all the dark clouds in the sky seemed to be swept away by the wind caused by their collision. They both flashed their claws and used their long tails to attack each other crazily. Their tails were more than 10 meters long, scarier than any siege hammer in the world. If they were hit, even a small hill would crumble in the blink of an eye. This wasn't a battle that humans could imagine just by listening to the bard's descriptions. The destructive power that the giant dragons displayed made Sasha think of the legendary god of destruction who specialized in destruction for a moment. Chapter 486. Roar. A savage, angry roar once again drew everyone's attention back to the sky. The battle for the King of the Air had begun as everyone had expected. The red dragon that was caught seemed to want to escape. It tried to go around Deathwing from the side. However, the opponent's larger body was undoubtedly a huge obstacle that couldn't be avoided. The bats on Deathwing's wings were like a city wall, covering the young red dragon's entire field of vision. It gave the red dragon the feeling that it couldn't pass without defeating the opponent. A dragon breath came out. The confused red dragon seemed to want to use fire to burn Deathwing's bats. Deathwing let out a scornful laugh. This was clear mockery. It flapped its wings, like extinguishing a tiny flame on a candle. Just a strong flap of its wings was enough to disperse the dragon breath. To the griffins, this larger crimson dragon was undoubtedly the most experienced one. However, against the more experienced and sharp ancient dragon guardian, its attacks were as childish as a baby's. When it spat out the dragon's breath, it revealed a flaw. The wing closest to the wings of death easily became the target of the attack. Originally, Deathwing only needed to stretch out its left claw to cut through its wing and greatly reduce its opponent's mobility in the air. Unexpectedly, Deathwing chose to tighten its left claw and retract it to its chest. Instead, it gave up on what was close at hand and swung its tail at the red dragon, causing it to move away from itself. This action was too uncoordinated. If one didn't see it clearly, they would think that its left claw was heavily injured in the previous battle and couldn't move. Deathwing wasn't injured, but why did it retreat? At first, Sasha thought she was seeing things. However, after watching, she realized that Deathwing's attack pattern was indeed very strange. As an ancient dragon that lived by fighting, Deathwing used all of its weapons, mouth, tail, wings, left and right legs, and right claw to attack. Except for its left claw. Deathwing's storm-like agility showed that it wasn't injured, but its left claw was still stuck to its body. No matter how one looked at it, it gave off an incongruous feeling of, an expert bullying an amateur, I'll let you have a one-handed advantage. Obviously, Deathwing wasn't the kind of dragon that had the demeanor of a strong. This could be seen from the fact that he instantly killed a young dragon at the beginning of the battle. Why? Sasha said to herself. Why did he do that? Falstead thought Sasha was complaining about him flying away from the battlefield. Sorry, he replied loudly. This is not a battle for mortals, and there is nothing we can do here but wait to die. Elf lady. You'd better hold on to the griffin's saddle. The first thing we need to do now is to get out of here. Leave here. What about Duque? The words pierced the weakest part of Windsor's heart. No. Wait a minute. Where was Duque? Where's Duque? Sasha screamed and shook the dwarf's shoulder. She didn't even know when she started crying. Falstead, are you going to abandon you and my companions because of fear? Turning around and seeing Sasha's tears, the dwarf's heart broke. Fear? No. Falstead had never been afraid of death. The problem was that everyone who was still alive was here. He finished it with a single glance. Your man is nowhere to be found. This has nothing to do with cowardice. Those who aren't here are all dead. They've turned to ashes, you know that. The dwarf waved his empty fist in excitement. His rough face was also streaked with tears. Sasha was also in a state of excitement. She didn't even notice the change in the dwarf's way of addressing Duque. At this moment, the battle in the sky came to an end. Deathwing took advantage of its immature opponent's mistake and used its longer tail to hook its opponent's head. The red dragon lost its balance in the air. The huge black dragon wings with dark red veins instantly surrounded the red dragon. Its right claw suddenly tore open the red dragon's bat wings, causing the red dragon's nervous attempt to regain its balance to fail. Under the fierce pull, the red dragon's defenseless back was exposed, as well as its neck that seemed to be waiting for a guillotine to fall. Fly, quick! 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 Falstead urged his griffin. If we don't leave now, we're all dead. The griffin used all its strength to fly away from the battlefield as fast as it could, even at the risk of cramping in the next moment. Sasha twisted her head and stared at the battle behind her. Deathwing bit down on the red dragon's neck, and there was the sound of chewing immediately. The sound traveled far in the dark night. The sound of flesh and blood splattering. The sound of bones breaking. Everything sounded so creepy. Then, with the help of her night vision, Sasha saw a dark red drizzle fall. Blood sprayed from the dragon's neck. The red dragon tried to twist its body, trying its best to escape Deathwing's attack. It struggled with all its might in vain. In the end, it still fell from the sky dejectedly. The seemingly intense battle only lasted for less than 2 minutes. No, it was even shorter, not even a minute. In such a short period of time, the 2 red dragons that were enough to destroy the entire Griffin squadron were killed effortlessly by the wings of death. It's over. It's going to be our turn soon. Falstead muttered in despair. What was strange was that Deathwing did not have any intention of chasing after the griffins. It only stared at its left claw in front of its chest, as if there was something inside it. What was it? Or was it someone? The black dragon did not even look at the griffins that were running away in panic. Suddenly, it turned towards the giant rock dam in the southeast of the wetland and flew away. When its huge figure disappeared from the Elven Ranger's sight, Sasha noticed that its left claw was still closed, as if it was protecting something precious. The Windrunner's third sister finally realized what was on Deathwing's claw. Duque, Deathwing has captured Duque. Falstead. We have to catch up to it. The dwarf looked at Sasha in disbelief. His mouth was so wide open from shock that it looked like a 7-pound cannon shell could be stuffed inside. When he saw the determination on Sasha's face that she really wanted him to approach the ancient ferocious beast, he gulped and said, I am indeed a brave warrior, my elf lady. But I have to remind you that this is too crazy. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.